Ruvia woke up because she started coughing very loudly. The girl did not understand what was happening and why she was now on the floor. It seemed like this was her 54th life. She climbed onto the bed and sighed. She is very tired of everything. She will live this life like a lazy person. Ruvia decided that she would just rest all the time and do nothing. But suddenly, a woman burst into her room, outraged that the girl had only just woken up. The woman said that Ruvia was as useless as her mother and weak to boot. The girl hasn't even had time to recharge yet, and she's already listening to lectures. The stepmother began to scream that she should come to her senses and finally get up and not blink her eyes. The lady thought that the girl had problems with her head due to the fever, but the girl told her to shut up, and the woman was completely horrified. This is Ruvia de Grandia la Roxen. She is 18 years old and died of a fever. She was the princess of the Duchy of Roxen. Princess is not the best status for a lazy life. Moreover, in everyday life she was ignored by the servants. The heartless stepmother and ruthless brother were also present. Selfish younger sister and indifferent father. She has a really awesome family. The woman kept screaming and asking why she was treating her like that. The main character thought that it would be difficult, but she could handle it. The stepmother continued to shout and ask what kind of tone Ruvia was allowing herself. She couldn't accept the fact that the girl was bragging about her bad blood. In this way, perhaps she should punish the girl properly so that she would come to her senses. The main character remembered that it was most likely the Archduke's wife Margaret, who was also the girl's stepmother. So the girl asked for forgiveness and said that she had just woken up and therefore had not yet come to her senses. If the lady has finished, the girl will ask her to leave. But if she had anything left to say, Ruvia would still tell her to leave. It's all because the girl is very tired and won't be receiving guests now. The stepmother was simply furious. She did not understand how this girl could be so insolent to her. But Ruvia looked at the woman in such a way that she even became frightened. For such a pampered aristocrat, her words would be excessive pressure. It would be desirable for her to get scared and just leave. The woman turned around and told her to get ready, because she would definitely punish her for such antics. After that, she turned around and began to leave, slamming the door behind her. Perhaps the main character went too far, but it's okay. Everything will resolve itself. Then the main character decided to go to the mirror and look at her appearance. Shiny silver hair and eyes like precious stones. She is very beautiful, as befits a princess. But being too attractive is also tiring. A princess title, a broken family, a pretty face. None of this suggests a lazy life. A more comfortable option would be to be rejected by a noble man. She's been through this before, so she knows what it's like. After that, Ruvia sighed and lay down on the sofa. She hadn't chatted so casually for a long time. After that, she shuddered because someone had broken into her place again. It was some guy asking if everything his mother said was true. She thought he was some kind of bore. He didn't even look very good. This is Marquis Sven. This is her brother from another mother, the eldest son of the great Archduke Ruin. This stepmother simply brought reinforcements and is standing behind blazing with anger. It seems that the girl started hallucinating due to fatigue, and she saw this guy with a dog in his hands. The man demanded that she answer because his mother had told him about her outrageous behavior. The main character sighed. She really wanted to rest already. They are all very annoying, and there is no end to it. She needs to end this conversation, and as quickly as possible. Therefore, the girl replied that everything was correct, and she had behaved rudely towards a person who calls herself a mother. Ruvia also noted that the first thing this woman did was reproach and taunt her daughter for almost dying of fever. The brother began to say that she was simply overdoing it. Perhaps mother's words upset her, but there was no evil intent in them. Ruvia, with a serious face, noted that she wanted to ask something. She asked again whether his lectures were really out of love for his younger sister, or whether he wanted her to show respect to family members no matter what. Her brother was simply horrified. He did not know what to answer. He was completely speechless from such a question. He will either understand that he is being unfair to his sick sister, or he will admit the fact that his mother was too rude. The guy noted that in any case, she was wrong, so she should apologize to her mother. The girl said apple because she decided to make a play on words apology and apple are the same word in Korean. The woman was simply horrified and asked again what it meant. The girl replied that she would give her an apple, so there was no need to sulk since she liked them so much she could go and eat as many as she liked. After this there was silence. The brother asked Ruvia again what was wrong with her behavior. For the sister replied that she did not think that she was wrong in anything. Apples are very healthy. It is enough to eat one a day to avoid getting seriously ill. Ruvia also noted that she knew what she was talking about. Apples are very healthy. Her brother was simply furious. He stepped into the teeth and told his mother that they thought it was time. The woman was outraged. She did not understand why he was not doing anything. The guy went and tried to take her, and the woman said that since he was sure of it, she would listen to him. They slammed the door behind them. In principle, the guy wasn't that stupid, since he realized that he had to leave when there was no chance of winning. After this, Ruvia decided to lie down on the bed again. Now she can sleep peacefully. When she was sleeping, she had a dream that she had not seen for a long time. She even cried because of it. She asked the maid to bring her something, but then she realized, the 53rd farewell, I still can't get used to parting with those she loved. She needs something to eat. Food is the best medicine for sadness. When she went out, she heard the maids gossiping. She asked for her food to be brought to her meat medium rare. If there is wine, then you also need to bring it, and it is preferable that it be from the Dorbed Winery Livian variety. The maids looked at her, askance. Ruvia asked again why they were standing there and ordered them to be brought immediately. The maid informed the lady that the time for serving dishes was over. There was no more food, and the other women began to laugh. Ruvia said that in that case, they should get ready because she could wait. The maid was in complete confusion and already asked herself again what she had just heard. The lady repeated that she had said to cook since there was no food. The maid sighed and remarked that she was nothing but trouble. She turned around and said that she would serve food immediately. As Ruvia sat at the table, she saw the other maids whispering among themselves. This problem cannot be solved quickly. This girl was constantly bullied. Well, she decided to forget about it because she needed to eat first. But suddenly a bowl of food flew onto her table. Everything spilled everywhere and splattered the lady. The maid replied that this was the only thing left and that she wished her bon appetite. The lady asked again if she really had nothing more to say. The maid remarked that next time she should try to arrive on time. They can't constantly adjust to her. Ruvia got up from the table and hit the woman so hard that she flew back. The lady ordered her to stand up. It seemed the difference in status between them was not enough for her. Ruvia is the first daughter of the Archduke Disrespect. For her is disrespect for the great Archduke Ruxin. So the lady asked again if she really had several lives left since she was behaving like that. The maid began to justify herself and say that she would never dare to show disrespect to her. She was even trembling. The lady noted where it was interesting to see what the other maids thought about this. The women immediately fell to their knees and noted that they too had been at fault, and therefore asked her to have mercy on them. They begged for mercy and said that they would definitely prepare everything. The lady said that she agreed with them and gave them another chance. The women were very grateful to her, bowed, and ran to the kitchen. They prepared a very good dinner for her. The girl was delighted, even though she scolded the head maid in front of everyone. But in any case, the people here ignore and are hostile to Ruvia. There are many ways to change the situation, such as gaining courage through good deeds and showing cruelty and destroying enemies. But the main problem is that all this requires strength. Even if she overcomes laziness and persuades people to her side, she will still be married off for convenience as soon as she comes of age. Princess Ruvia already has a fiancé. He is the fourth prince of the Western Empire, an exceptional figure who has gathered enough power to threaten the crown prince. even without having the right to inherit. He is the most outstanding suitor in the entire western part of the continent. Her life will go down the drain if she marries the fourth prince. Whatever the case, this union cannot be allowed, so she decided to act. A knight approached her from behind. He greeted the lady and said that the great archduke was calling her to him. The girl was surprised and now asked if the archduke was really calling her right now. The knight confirmed this, and the girl considered it an excellent opportunity. She asked for a knight to escort her. As the Western proverb goes, "Cut the twisted knot," she would immediately cut ties with this family. The lady came and bowed. She introduced herself and greeted the great archduke. Now she knew what kind of ruler the Grand Duchy of Ruxan was. Just by looking at him, you can tell that, as a leader, he is impeccable. The man noted that she was not being friendly today, and the lady noted that she was not guilty of anything. Therefore, there was no reason to worry. After thinking for a while, the father noticed that she had changed, as if she were a completely different person. In principle, that's true. Well, the girl decided to tell him that it was growing up every morning. She was getting a little taller, and it seemed that her character was changing just as quickly. The father was surprised and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. The girl didn't understand what kind of reaction this was. Apparently, she thought that he wouldn't like it. Ruvia's birth mother was not from a noble family, but the great archduke's love was so great that he wanted to take her as his wife. However, the daughter of his beloved woman will be carried away by the fever, caused by all sorts of neglect from society and humiliation from her stepmother. It is unclear why this man did nothing. The father asked her if she knew why he had called her, and the girl replied that she had a rough idea. "My father is going to scold me, but he won't tolerate unnecessary noise in his house. So he asks her to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. He'll talk to her mother later." The girl believed that he was simply asking her to cover the rotting wound with a rag and not pay attention. Father didn't understand what she was saying, and that made him a little angry. Ruvia told him that there were two options to heal the wound. The first is to take medication little by little and wait until it heals, and the second is to simply squeeze out the pus and thereby get rid of it. But since it is too late, we must use the second option. Today she leaves the Ruxan Duchy. The servant was in complete shock and asked again what the lady was talking about. The father asked her again if she really thought he would listen to this nonsense, but the girl noted that he would have to listen to it. It's all because he is the cause of this wound. Ruvia knows she's an eyesore in this house. If it stays, it will never heal sooner, and they will continue to hurt each other, so for the sake of everyone she will leave. And when her father did not answer, she remarked that she would assume that he agreed, and that she would leave the duchy during the day. After which, the girl thanked her father and told him to take care of himself. She turned around and started to leave, slamming the door behind her so that her father didn't have time to say anything. He didn't even try to hold her back, although it only played into her hands. Ruvia is actually such an unfortunate child. She will live this life happily for her sake. She began to collect her things, took her clothes, and also took a blanket instead of a sleeping bag. She doesn't have any jewelry, but she can earn money. In principle, this should be enough. Then someone approached her and asked what she was doing now. They say the princess left the mansion, so the servant thought it was worth stopping her. The archduke turned to the knight and told him to watch the princess until she returned. It won't take too much time. The knight turned to the duke and asked what would happen if the princess really decided to leave the duchy forever. The man replied that then he would have to bring her back here by force. The man, of course, listened to his master and quickly left. The servant turned to the master and asked what he intended to do if the princess was brought against her will. He understands the master's feelings perfectly well. The princess is not guilty of anything. The archduke replied that he knew and understood this perfectly well. The princess acted a little differently. She was always so depressed, but today she looked more determined than anyone else, and it seemed to him that she would forever fly away to where they could not reach. Earlier, her brother approached her and asked what she was doing there. The girl replied that she was going to leave the mansion. Her brother didn't understand what she was talking about and thought it was just some kind of stupid joke. Ruvia asked for forgiveness, but she thinks this is the only right path for her. But the brother did not understand why she decided so, which is why the girl asked if there really were better options. If they had been, the situation would not have gone so far. Her brother did not know at all what to say to this. Therefore, the girl said that in that case, she would already be leaving, and also wished him good health. Her brother grabbed her hand and asked her to wait and take something from him. This is an amulet with the seal of the great Archduke Ruxin. If she has any pleasures, she must use it. It's an artifact with a lot of magic. He suggested that she use it in an emergency. She should have tried while Ruvia was alive. But now it was too late. She was ready to say goodbye to this house. But suddenly she heard someone calling her very loudly. It was Marie, the mistress's maid, who said with tears in her eyes that she would go with her mistress. The girl did not understand how she could leave her. She could not live without her mistress. In her haste, the main character completely forgot that this child was the only one who was on Ruvia's side. The lady asked Marie to come back. It would be very difficult for her with the lady. But the girl said that there was nothing to worry about and that she would be useful to the mistress, so she begged to be taken along. Ruvia didn't understand why she was being so stubborn. Nothing good would happen to her with her. But the girl said that she wanted to go with the lady because she liked her. She remembered the guy's words about how he was going after her because he liked her, and it was obvious. The lady nevertheless agreed, because if the girl wanted it that way, she would take her with her. Marie was very grateful to her and promised that she would be a smart girl. The lady asked if Marie had any money by any chance. The girl replied that she had a little, but she spent it on a cake. And she also said that she would definitely earn more money. The lady was surprised. The girl began to say that she was very capable and that it would not be difficult for her to get money. She was so cute that Ruvia even smiled. She asked again if Marie really liked cakes that much. The girl replied that of course she really liked the strawberry ones. The lady asked what else she liked to eat. The girl said that she likes filet mignon and also veal tenderloin steak. In fact, she had never tried them, but she had seen the owners eating them and was very envious. Then Ruvia smiled and said that tonight's dinner was filet mignon and strawberry shortcake. The girl got scared and asked again what they would do because they had no money. The lady noted that money could be earned and asked the girl to follow her. The maid asked again what her mistress wanted to do and hoped that she was not going to do anything bad. Marie asked if the lady had any business in this establishment. The man asked what they had come for. Ruvia asked if she could borrow the instrument for a while. The man was surprised when he looked at the harp and noted that their establishment did not rent it out. The lady said she would give him 5 cents for 2 hours. He was very surprised, and Maria noted that the harp itself cost 10 cents. Well, Our Lady relied only on the power of the aristocracy. The man agreed and said that he owed her the harp. When they left, it was Mary who asked what her mistress was going to do with it. Ruvia noted that this was how she was going to make money and noted that this place would suit them. She asked Marie to hold the hat. The girl was surprised and asked the lady what she was going to do. Ruvia asked her to turn it over so that she could put money in it. The girl could not believe that her mistress was actually going to play the harp now. People immediately heard the sound and began to think that it was some kind of street concert. Everyone came to their senses. The maid was very worried. Everyone was shocked. They didn't know that there was such a skilled musician on this street. It was very nice to play the harp again. In her past life, she couldn't even touch an instrument. A whole crowd gathered. They threw in a lot of coins. Marie thanked everyone. She was simply delighted the crowd could not understand who could play this harp so well. Suddenly, the woman suggested that the girl give a concert in her house. Everyone started arguing. They lined up to see whose house they would host the concert at. One of the men suggested that she become a permanent musician in their home, and the noise and hubbub began. The lady told Maria that it was time for them to go. When Marie started counting the money, she realized that it came to about 300 cents. It looks like this is the monthly salary of ordinary citizens." The maid thought that the mistress had never held a musical instrument in her hands, so she was interested in how the mistress managed to play such a beautiful melody. The girl replied that she was simply a genius, and the maid was simply delighted. Maria noted that she thought so, which is why the lady always looked as if she lived in her own world. It was good that this girl trusted her. The lady was pleased with that. She asked the maid to keep an eye on this money. Now she will be responsible for all her savings. Ruvia is, after all, the princess of the Duchy of Ruxan, and cannot control the finances on her own, so Marie will be in charge of this. The girl was simply delighted. She promised that she would try, so you can trust her point. Now the mistress suggested going out to eat, and the maid, of course, did not refuse. Marie became very embarrassed and remarked that I also had to go to such a place for her sake. Ruvia replied that it was not because of her, and that the lady herself wanted it that way. She also likes veal tenderloin steak and strawberry shortcake, so she shouldn't jump to conclusions. The girl was simply delighted and told her that she would definitely try even harder. Ruvia asked me if she found it strange that her behavior had changed so much. The girl replied that it was of course surprising, but everything was fine because the lady, this was her favorite lady, and she likes how resilient she is now even more. But this does not mean that her character was bad before. It was just that before her heart would break into pieces just from looking at her mistress. But she likes everything, both the way she was before and the way she is now. The lady smiled, and the girl asked what the gentlemen were thinking of doing next. She thought that she would be a bard. Ruvia replied that this was not the case. They would go to the line. Free city of Lynette, the land of the Western Empire, which I do not belong to anyone 200 years ago. It was just an ordinary village. And now it is the most significant city on the continent, all thanks to the prestigious academy. Lynette Academy is a higher education institution with many specializations. Teenagers up to the age of 20 study there. It is a place with which the girl has deep memories. Ruvia simply founded this academy in one of her past lives. The lady decided to rent a room and asked if there were rooms on the top floor. It cost 50 cents. The girl replied that of course there was, and asked which room she preferred and whether they wanted to stay alone. The woman said she wanted a better room for two. Marie asked if they would stay there today. The lady replied that it was so, because they needed to get on the ship to get to Lynette, and since it was necessary to catch the first flight and not spend the night here. The girl tried to explain to the lady that it is very expensive here, and you also have to buy a ticket. The lady noted that there was no need to worry. She had everything under control. When the lady was taking a bath, Mary asked why she wanted to go to the linen. She assumed that the girl was going to enter the academy. The lady replied that this was true. They were currently recruiting freshmen, so she wanted to take the entrance exam. Marie noted that chasing your dream is very inspiring, and her mistress is very cool. Basically, this is the first step to living as a sloth. If you are accepted, food and accommodation are provided free of charge, as the education here is skills-based. If you pass the tests well, there will be no questions about attendance. So this is a golden prize. Marie asked if the lady had thought of what direction she wanted to go to. She noted that a special female engineer would be suitable for the lady. But the lady noted that she had not yet thought about this and needed to decide. Ruvia is going on vacation. She doesn't even think about studying. How many years of free food and idleness have I had? Look, she was smiling, but the lady decided to ask what was making her so happy. The girl noted that she was simply in a good mood. Today she tried filet mignon for the first time, and tomorrow she would board a boat for the first time. So the girl was happy that she would go with the mistress to the linen, and she was incredibly happy that she was doing it next to the mistress. The lady remarked that when they got there, she would buy her a mountain of strawberry cakes. The next morning, Marie reported that she had already packed everything. The lady noted that we need to buy something for the journey. After all, it will take 3 days to sail. We need to prepare in advance. And also, she opened the door and immediately saw Sir Urbo. She noted that she could see him and there was no need to hide. She told him not to pretend he had been following them since yesterday. The gentleman greeted the lady, and she asked what he needed. She replied that the Duke had instructed him to ensure her safety, so he asked for understanding because he was forced to follow her. The lady noted that she had no intention of sending him back. The man did not understand what she wanted from him. Then, Ruvia notices that he works hard, so she invites him to come in for tea. Meanwhile, Marie whispered to the lady what they would do if he caught them. Even if you speak quietly, the owner of Manna, sir, will hear absolutely every word. Therefore, the lady did not answer, and told him to drink this tea and accept it from her and Marie, as a token of gratitude for his care. The gentleman was very grateful to her and began to drink tea. After this, he turned to the lady and told her to return to the duchy. The lady replied that it was not interesting, and the knight did not understand why this was so and whether she was really going to leave these lands. The lady noted because it was indeed so they were sailing away on today's ship. The knight said that he could not allow this. The Duke ordered him to return her home, even against her will, but only if she leaves his domain or does not return for a long time. In principle, this was unexpected. The girl did not expect this. She noted that she understood perfectly well that he had an order and a knight, and he thought with joy that this meant that they were going to the duchy. The lady noted that he should also understand her situation, just as she understands his situation. The knight was in complete shock. He did not understand what the lady was talking about. Everything went dark before his eyes. He fell with his forehead on the table. Marie was very scared. She immediately rushed to him and called for the mistress in a panic. The lady told her to leave him like that. He fell asleep. Maria did not understand what this meant, but the lady noted that if she listened closely, she would hear that he was even snoring. It worked, like clockwork. Her sleeping pills are good. The girl asked the lady why he fell asleep so suddenly. Ruvia noticed that he must be tired, and she suggested moving him to the bed so that he could get a good night's sleep. And they said that Sir was the most outstanding of all the wielders of mana. Drinking tea from the object of surveillance, he is some kind of an amateur. He is so naive. The lady closed the door, left a note for the knight that the payment for the stay was due, and she was leaving it to him, and hoped that this would not happen again. This is a punishment for his actions, not because she didn't want to pay. Marie was absolutely delighted with what she saw, and hastened to inform the lady that this was the port of Lynette. Her eyes were shining, and her voice trembled with admiration. Meanwhile, the lady felt very tired. She could hardly hold back a yawn, because long days on the road had exhausted her. The 3 days spent on the ship had not passed without a trace. The lady's entire body seemed to have become numb. Every muscle ached from the tension. Marie, not hiding her delight, shouted loudly for the lady to look at the huge port. For her, this sight was truly wonderful. However, the lady reacted calmly. She only dryly noted that the port was certainly beautiful, but it did not touch her. The girl was surprised that the lady remained indifferent. Ruvia, noticing her surprise, said with a slight smile that, of course, she was surprised. Marie chuckled and noticed that the lady was lying now. In fact, she simply did not understand what everyone was admiring so much. For the lady, such views were familiar. This was not her first visit to such a large city, and she even lived here once. She was a teacher then, and walked these streets, holding the hand of a boy, who excitedly asked if they would live here. The lady then confidently replied that this city would become their new home, and her words were full of warmth and promise. The children were delighted with her words, especially when they learned that the lady was going to build a school for them here. The boy asked with interest what the lady would name the school. She suggested that the children think of a name themselves and choose it together. The children perked up and began vying with each other to offer their ideas, happily raising their hands to be heard. The blue-haired boy suggested naming the school Lynette, and the idea immediately caused a storm of emotions among the others. Everyone was delighted with the proposal, but the lady gently advised them to look for another name to find something special. However, the children insisted that the name could not be changed. They wanted to name the school after the lady, to perpetuate her name. At that time, it was just a small school for 5 orphans. The lady could not even imagine that it would become the best on the entire continent. Even if she had to spend 1,000 years in Lynette Academy, she would be happy because the school became her pride. Almost 200 years have passed, and very few memories remain. From that time, only shadows of the past. But these warm memories still gave the lady strength and encouraged her a little in the present. Ruvia was soon informed that her registration was complete, and the exam was scheduled for the following week. Marie confidently told the lady not to worry. She believed in her and knew that everything would definitely work out. Even if the lady fails the exams, she won't be upset. It won't be a problem for her. She'll find something else to do. It's easy for her to earn money. Ruvia thought that it was worth remembering how smart and capable her mistress was. She always managed to overcome difficulties. Talented guys from all over the West came to the exams. Everyone wanted to get in. The competition was serious. The competition was fierce. As the level of knowledge has changed over the last 200 years, the demands are now much higher. The lady really didn't want to study, but she had to. Without preparation, she risked failing the exams. She told Maria to go to the dormitory first. She decided to go to the library. She needed to study. The maid said that she would take the bags, since the mistress wanted to stay in the library to study. Maria happily said goodbye and ran to the dormitory, leaving the lady alone with the books. Ruvia chose a book about humanity's history and philosophy. She decided to read it to understand the topic. The title of the book seemed tiresome. She didn't understand why it was so interesting, but it was a pleasure to read. She wondered why she enjoyed reading so much. She realized that she hadn't read for pleasure in a long time. Her previous life was harsh, full of battles, conspiracies, and death. There was no room for peace. Back then, she only dreamed of one day calmly reading books without thinking about battles and dangers. It seems her wish came true. Reading turned out to be much more interesting than boring official documents. After reading, the lady decided to rest a little and went out into the garden to unwind in the fresh air. She was sitting quietly in the garden, not bothering anyone, when suddenly someone addressed her, breaking the silence. Opening her eyes, she saw a girl with pink hair standing in front of her, looking at her. The girl was surprised and said that at first she thought she was mistaken, but it really was Mrs. Ruvia. She noted that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and a friendly, warm smile appeared on her face. It was the daughter of Marquise Hansen, and her name was Janet. She greeted the lady and remarked that it was very surprising because she did not expect to see her here. She was the famous Princess Ruvia of the Duchy. She wondered why the girl at the academy assumed she was there to take the exams. Janet admired her bravery. She believed that it would anger the Grand Duke. It is a great honor for any family if one of them passes the exam at the academy, but one can also dishonor the name of their house if they fail. The dim-witted Princess Roxana, a disgrace to the duchy and a mockery of high society. Why is she trying to take the entrance exam to Lynette? She will fail it anyway. She has no shortage of courage. That's what she's trying to say. Marquise Hansen's daughter, Jeanette. Her father is one of those who maintain the empire's power. One might say he is a great aristocrat. It's not far behind the Duchy in importance, but she can handle it no matter what. The lady noted that before the most common thing she saw was blood, but here was a girl who looked like cotton candy, which was quite cute. The girl did not quite understand what Lady Ruvia's smile meant. Meanwhile, the lady came to have some fun and said that judging by her words, she was not at all afraid of failing. The girl noted that it was all because of this that she prepared with all her might. The lady asked if she could ask a couple of questions, then because she had recently read a book and was confused. The girl replied that the lady could ask her as many questions as she wanted. Ruvia asked if she could answer how Kaysan's problems affected the future generation in the war for the liberation of the Southern Empire in the year 524 of the host calendar. Janet replied that it was a very standard question. She began to talk about the victory of the Southern Empire over the northern one, describing how it affected the political balance, but the lady abruptly interrupted her, saying that she did not want to hear about the consequences of the war. She then asked cautiously about Kaysan's role in the emancipation movement, noting that the movement had changed not only Southern society, but had also had an impact on the eastern lands. The girl was frightened and hastened to justify herself, saying that she meant something completely different and that her words were misunderstood. To change the subject, she asked about Fresnel's theorem concerning the refraction of light and asked how to correctly establish the beta factor in the 38th equation for a given differential. The girl tried to answer something, but quickly realized that she would not be able to explain such a complex topic and fell silent. The lady, seeing her confusion, decided to ask an even more difficult question about the paradoxical reaction of the empathic nerve and the physiological reactions of the body. She noticed how the girl began to twitch nervously and wondered why such a reaction arose to such a simple, in her opinion, question. The lady realized that this topic was probably not the best one to tease the girl about, and perhaps it would be worth changing the approach. She decided to ask the girl if she had prepared well for the classes, hoping to hear a more confident answer. The girl blushed deeply, but still said that she had prepared diligently and tried her best. The lady smiled and said that she was grateful for her efforts, and perhaps she should read a little more herself. You shouldn't think that the lady said this mockingly. She was really worried about her and wanted to help. The girl turned away, and the lady could not understand what exactly caused her to behave like that. The girl began to walk away, sadly, and the lady wondered if she should have pressed her harder, because if she continued to bully her, it would become tiresome. Although deep down, the lady did not believe that Janet could defeat her in anything. Besides, she felt a little sorry for this sweet girl, who seemed to have no idea about some things. Feeling hungry, the lady decided to treat herself to something tasty in honor of the fact that the girl had studied well after all. A week later, her maid Maria was confident that her mistress would pass the upcoming exam without difficulty. But even if she doesn't cope, it's not scary. You shouldn't worry too much about it and put too much pressure on yourself. The man announced that the exam was about to begin. The lady immediately prepared herself, holding her pen at the ready. She was calm and ready to begin the tasks. When she saw the questions, she thought they were too easy. She was confused, not knowing what to do, because her team was trying hard. She also realized that she forgot to find out how many points were needed to pass. If she answered perfectly, it might raise suspicion. Behind her sat Janet, who confidently filled in the answers. The lady noticed her concentration and calm. From the way Janet worked confidently, it became clear that the tasks were really not difficult, and perhaps there was no catch. The lady decided that she would score exactly 90 points. This would be enough to pass the exam and not stand out. She thought it was a great plan. From now on, her life would be easier. She could afford to be a little lazy. In the morning, while the lady was sleeping, someone was thinking about how she had done on the exam and whether she was confident in her answers. Despite the high level of competition, no one doubted her abilities. She was seen as a strong competitor. The lady told everyone that she was sure everything would be fine. She did not allow the thought of failure. She considered herself a genius. She was sure that passing the exam was just a formality for her. She gave just enough correct answers to get 90 points. That's definitely enough to pass. The maid asked again if she had heard correctly, and added that everyone around her was talking about how difficult the exam was. Hearing this, she began to get even more nervous. The lady stood up abruptly and asked in surprise whether the exam was really as difficult as everyone said, as if she didn't believe what she heard. After all, on the way, she overheard you saying that in the last 10 years, the exam had not been as difficult as it was this time. There are rumors that some people think it is pointless to wait for the results and simply leave without even hoping for a positive outcome. The lady could not believe her ears and wondered if she had gone too far when she expected to get at least 90 points. Although if you think about it, there are real talents gathered here from all over the continent, so there is probably no need to worry in advance. She tried to calm herself down, hoping she was right, but she still crawled into the blanket and sat wrapped up to hide her anxiety. The maid noticed that many seemed to have failed and did not understand how this had happened. The mistress admitted that she herself was a little worried. When she said her name, the man was completely shocked to hear that the person standing in front of him was the princess of the Duchy. The lady confirmed that it was indeed her, and then the man said that they had been waiting for her for a long time, asking them to open the letter quickly. As soon as she opened the envelope, she felt a bad feeling, and after reading the letter, she realized that she was in serious trouble. Ruvia couldn't understand why she had the best result. She hoped that there was a mistake, because she didn't think that 90 points could be the highest. However, I understood perfectly well how such a result could be the best among all. Janet approached Ruvia smiling slightly as she noticed that they had met again. There was a certainty in her voice, as if she had been expecting this meeting in advance. Janet asked curiously how the lady had done on the exam. There was a hint of mockery in her tone, as if she already knew the answer. Although according to her, there was no need to even answer. Janet understood everything perfectly well. She added that there was no need to be upset. Passing the entrance exams to Lynette Academy is incredibly difficult. Janet pointed out that if Ruvia wanted to retake the exam next year, she could always come to her for help. There was confidence in her voice. Janet added that she thought she could be a great support to Ruvia. She was confident in her abilities and knew how to help. At this point, their conversation was interrupted by the woman at the registration desk. She noted that the lady seemed to be getting it all mixed up, hinting at a misunderstanding of the situation. Ruvia wanted to object to explain that this was not so, but Janet exclaimed sharply that she had had enough of such talk. Her voice sounded irritated. Janet chuckled and noted that the lady was probably trying to hide the obvious result. She bowed her head respectfully and asked permission to take her leave. Ruvia, feeling awkward, apologized and added that she was just too shy. Her voice trembled, betraying her nervousness. The woman with the registration understood everything perfectly. Ruvia hadn't even managed to enroll in the academy yet, and she was already having problems with those around her. Ruvia was about to leave when the woman with the registration stopped her, saying that she had something that needed her attention. The woman smiled softly, noticing that there was at least one person who actually wanted to see her. It warmed her heart, even if things weren't going according to plan. Her hopes for an easy 4 years at the academy were shattered. All dreams of a quiet life disappeared when the reality turned out to be much more complicated. A tall, imposing man came out to meet her, in whom Baron Cruzen was unmistakably recognized. His appearance immediately attracted attention, making her wary. Seeing the person who scored the highest points in the history of the academy in person was truly amazing. It's not something that happens every day. In her past life, Ruvia founded this academy herself, and she never imagined that the exams would become so difficult for future students. Entering the academy will only complicate her life, because the attention to the person who scored the highest score will be constant, and there will be no time to rest. Then she decided to clarify the situation right away and said that before starting the conversation, she wanted to clarify something in order to avoid misunderstandings. The man seemed not to understand her words and asked again what exactly she was talking about, clearly not expecting such a start to the conversation. Ruvia replied that it was about her scores. She admitted that on some tasks she was just lucky and guessed the right answers. Her high entrance scores did not reflect her actual level of knowledge. It was more a lucky accident than an indicator of her ability. The man laughed, noting that Lady Ruvia was not only smart, but also knew how to display her abilities modestly and gracefully. This combination of intelligence and modesty seemed magnificent to him. He wanted Ruvia to understand that his admiration was not only due to her success at the ball. Her intelligence and insight had made no less an impression on him. When he looked at her answer sheet, it was hard to hide his surprise. Even in short sentences, she clearly and distinctly revealed the essence of each question. Some of her answers seemed so precise and profound that they transcended even established academic dogmas and views. He found it hard to believe he had never seen such obvious talent in his entire life. If this wasn't destiny, he didn't know what it was. He realized that there was very little time left before retirement, but in the end, he would make every effort to reveal her outstanding potential. He was determined and did not want to put it off any longer. But it was at this moment that Ruvia decided to do things her way. She calmly stated that she was going to cancel her application to the academy, which puzzled him greatly. The man did not understand what she was talking about. He tried to comprehend her words and find some meaning in them, but in vain. He thought he might have misheard, but Ruvia repeated. She was sorry to have misled him, but she had to go. The man asked her to stop and wait. He did not understand why she was doing this and what was really going on. Then Ruvia frankly said that she had a good reason for this decision, although it was not easy for her to talk about it. Ruvia suffered from a chronic illness. She barely passed the exam, and her high score was a surprise, but studying at the academy will be too much for her. The man looked at Ruvia with interest and asked if he could find out what kind of illness was tormenting her. His voice was full of concern, but there was also a hint of curiosity in it. The director assured her with confidence that he wanted to help. The academy, he said, had the best medical specialists, and perhaps someone could ease her suffering. However, Ruvia calmly replied that she suffered from migraines, a disease that could not be cured even on the advanced Western continent where medicine had made great strides. She added that if she gets a little tense or worried, she starts to get severe headaches that prevent her from living and studying normally. If it weren't for this constant pain, she would have certainly tried to cope with her studies, but Ruvia felt that in her condition it would simply be impossible. She assumed that the director had a lot to do and thanked him for his attention. Due to illness, admission was impossible, but the academy will always remain in her heart. However, the man was not going to give in. He thought for a moment and offered her a completely different, unexpected option. The principal said that Ruvia could stay at the academy. She didn't have to attend classes regularly. They would find a special approach for her. If she promises to study, the director will personally take care of her passing grades. All classes and homework can be replaced with tests at a time convenient for her. Ruvia thanked him warmly for the offer, but added that she could not make any promises now, as she was not confident in her abilities. She was about to leave, but the director reminded her of the academy's rule. No one can be expelled during the academic year so that students do not drop out after receiving a scholarship. However, if Ruvia decided to leave, no one would stop her. She thought the conditions were really favorable. It was unlikely that they would offer better anywhere else, but the very fact that she had to make promises was very stressful for her. In this world, the laws she was accustomed to did not apply. One of the local rules was that if a person made a promise, it automatically became mandatory to fulfill regardless of the circumstances. This was because her soul energy was much more powerful than others. Once she made a promise, it would gain power, and Ruvia would be forced to fulfill it with no right to retreat. Realizing this, Ruvia firmly said that she could not accept such conditions. She apologized because she did not want to seem ungrateful, but she could not promise anything under such circumstances. The director of the academy, after listening to her, nodded with understanding. He said that he understood her difficulties and was ready to consider only the conclusion of her doctor. Otherwise, unfortunately, they would have no other solution. Ruvia remained silent in response. She felt a little ashamed in her heart because the director was being sincere, not motivated by personal gain. He was genuinely worried about her and her future. He was a true educator who genuinely cared about the development of the academy and tried to retain talented people like Ruvia. His words were full of respect and support. Ruvia felt sorry that in this world, people like him and academies like him remained in the shadows. Their work and sincerity often went unnoticed, even though they deserved more. Finally, the director added that the doors of the academy would always be open to her. They would wait for her return when she was well and ready to return to school. Ruvia remembered the teacher being told that he would definitely continue to develop the academy. He wanted not only to preserve her legacy, but also to widely disseminate the knowledge she left behind. She shuddered, noticing that the second headmaster of the academy had the same zeal. If you looked closely, there was indeed something in common in their looks and gestures. Everything that was happening completely confused her. Ruvia no longer tried to figure it out and simply waved her hand, deciding not to burden her head with unnecessary thoughts. She said she had a few conditions. Ruvia gently asked if the director was willing to listen to her and accept these conditions. The director smiled warmly and confidently replied that he would certainly do whatever she asked without hesitating for a minute. Marie was simply delighted when she first saw Ruvia's room. Spacious, bright, and elegant, it looked as if it belonged to a noble person and not an academy student. Everything here was arranged with exquisite taste, and this place did not at all resemble a typical dormitory. Marie immediately realized that such comfort was rare, even in rich houses. It was really worth the long journey for this. Marie thought that all this trouble and travel were completely justified when she saw where the lady would now live. Now that they had finally arrived, it was a relief to breathe a sigh of relief. The lady could rest peacefully in this cozy and luxurious room, enjoying the silence. Marie noticed that the lady had not only entered the academy, but had also passed her exams with top marks. She was curious as to why Ruvia had asked her to hide this fact, since it would soon be known anyway. However, Ruvia firmly said that no one would know about her success. That is why she asked Marie to keep it a secret and not to reveal her achievements to anyone. Cruz and Ruvia put forward two conditions that had to be followed unconditionally, and this surprised the academy administration. The first condition was the right to leave the academy at any time if unforeseen circumstances arose, which seemed unusual for such a talented student. The second condition was to keep her exam results a secret. Ruvia insisted that no one except the management know about it. The director of the academy did not understand why such outstanding achievements should be hidden. Her scores were record-breaking and would have been a historic event for the educational institution. He believed that such achievements should be known to everyone, but Ruvia explained that too much attention could cause her health to deteriorate. The man did not fully understand what illness was being discussed, and at first tried to object. It seemed strange to him that someone would voluntarily give up fame. However, he eventually realized that it was impossible to change Ruvia's conditions. Her determination was unyielding, and the director had to give in. Marie began to sob with resentment. Her mistress deserved universal recognition, and she wanted her talents to be known throughout the continent. But Ruvia didn't plan to live like ordinary students. Her plans and views on studying were completely different, and she didn't strive for popularity. Ruvia felt that she had to do something to make things better. Her thought was that Maria needed a little pampering to make her feel better. The director should have been given some research work, perhaps even his own, so that he could use it as some kind of contribution to the success of the academy, which would give him an additional achievement. When Maria asked why the lady was lying in bed, Ruvia answered calmly that she would rest and that from now on, she would sleep constantly feeling how her body needed rest. At this time, the rest of the students are having fun, hanging out, and making new friends before the entrance ceremony, preparing for an important moment in their lives, which creates an atmosphere of anticipation. Some of them have already managed to become very close, and perhaps they are really lucky, because such relationships help to survive moments of uncertainty and excitement. But as always for geniuses, loneliness is an inevitable part of their path. They are always alone with themselves, absorbed in their own thoughts and reflections. The maid didn't understand what was going on. Her gaze was puzzled, but even in the future she wouldn't care. She continued to think that she needed to establish friendly relations with others. Ruvia replied that she would make friends, but only after some time. She needed some time, about 70 hours, before she could do something new. The maid suggested to the mistress that she start looking for new friends and perhaps a boyfriend, so as not to dwell on her loneliness and to find support among people. The lady was shocked by this proposal. She had not expected such advice from her maid, who was always calm and reasonable. She couldn't understand how this could be possible. A guy? The maid explained that the fourth prince was studying at the academy, and this could be a chance for her. The maid believed that their meeting might not be accidental, that fate might bring them together, and that she might be destined to be with this prince. The maid's imagination already had a vivid picture. Her mistress and the fourth prince, as a couple together, at some ball or reception ceremony, surrounded by attentive glances. The lady asked Maria to repeat her words, not believing her ears. She could not accept that her maid was speaking about the prince with such confidence. Maria reiterated that the fourth prince was not only a student at the academy, but was also the class leader, making him an important figure among the students. The lady was shocked by this news. It was too unexpected, and she could not believe that such a person as the prince could be in her life. As the maid poured the tea, she noticed that something was wrong with her mistress. Ruvia looked puzzled and thoughtful, as if questions were spinning in her head. Ruvia was serious. She looked frowning as if her thoughts were bothering her. Something didn't add up, and she couldn't get over the idea. She couldn't understand why this prince was studying at Lynette Academy. If he was from the imperial family, it would be better for him to stay in the palace, not here. If Ruvia had known that the meeting with the fourth prince would happen so quickly, she would have tried to resolve the matter before leaving the duchy to avoid any possible problems. However, if you think about it, she wouldn't have to leave the dorm, because in 4 years she would have finished her studies and received a diploma without facing any unnecessary hassle. The chances of meeting the prince during this time were slim, as Ruvia had no plans to come out of her hiding place and was planning to spend all her time in her room, avoiding all meetings. Besides being a runaway princess, her marriage to him would be declared invalid, and that would solve most of her problems, freeing her from unnecessary obligations and pressure. If this did not happen, Ruvia would be forced to resolve the situation on her own. But this no longer seemed such a difficult task to her, because she was used to dealing with difficulties. However, she felt very good in bed, and now she was happily enjoying her rest, as if her whole life was reduced to only cozy solitude and comfort. After 12 hours, the maid, who was very worried about her mistress's condition, brought her food, hoping that it would help her regain her strength and return to her usual rhythm of life. After another 24 hours, the maid tried to wake Ruvia, worried that her long absence might affect her well-being and put her in a negative mood. 48 hours had passed, and the maid had already tried all the methods to wake up her mistress, but none of them worked, and Ruvia still did not wake up. Finally, after 72 hours, Ruvia woke up, reporting that she had finally had a good night's sleep and was feeling great despite the long rest and stress of the last few days. Ruvia noticed that Maria's behavior was strange, which immediately caught her attention. She quickly realized that something was wrong, although she could not explain exactly what it was. She tried to talk to the maid, but she refused to talk to her, clearly avoiding communication. This alerted Ruvia, making her think about what was happening. Ruvia noticed that Marie seemed more confident, believing that her mistress did not need anything from such a simple girl. This made her think that something was wrong with their relationship. Realizing that the maid was offended, Ruvia decided to calm her down a little and offered to try something tasty. She hoped that this would help ease the tension and establish contact. Ruvia suggested that they eat some strawberry cake, but the maid immediately turned away, clearly not interested in such an offer, and refused, which surprised Ruvia even more. The lady thought that in that case, we could go to the restaurant Mayan, where they serve delicious spaghetti with seafood and tomatoes. She even suggested taking some strawberry juice with us. Ruvia decided that if the maid did not join in, she would eat everything herself. This caused Marie to come over and remark that such attempts were unnecessary and that she should not worry about her condition. Maria still couldn't hide her worries and admitted that she couldn't do anything about it. This emphasized her concern, even if she didn't show it openly. Ruvia was puzzled how it was possible not to worry about her mistress. It seemed impossible to her because caring for the person you serve is a natural part of their relationship. Ruvia explained that just as a child needed its mother, so too did a maid need to be close to her mistress. This care was an important part of their mutual bond. Ruvia said that if they didn't leave soon, there would be a lot of people on the street and they might run into a crowd, so she wanted to leave as early as possible to avoid unnecessary inconvenience. Maria noticed that the lady only had 20 sen left and decided to ask if she had any money. It was a question that clearly bothered her, given the current situation. The lady was amazed and asked in surprise what the girl had been eating all this time, if they were so limited in funds. This clearly shocked her greatly. Marie calmly replied that she had been eating buns left over from the previous days. She reminded him that housing and food were only provided to students. She should have been more careful. The lady asked the girl to show respect, but Marie immediately replied that there was no need to apologize and that she did not need excessive politeness about this. Everything was fine. She liked these buns. Then the lady asked with interest if Maria knew what she hated most in the world. This is the question she always asks. Ruvia replied that she hates it most when people live in poverty. If someone is dear to her, she wants them to live with dignity, be well-fed, well-dressed, and not need anything. That is why her maid Marie must live the same way. Marie tried to explain that it was enough for her to just be near her mistress, that this was already enough for her happiness. However, Ruvia did not agree and insisted that the maid follow her. Marie was a little confused, not understanding what exactly she was about to do. Ruvia said they would go earn money, and this time the task would not just be to earn money, but to collect as much as possible. It was a clear goal to which they confidently went. All the students looked so energetic and full of energy that Mrs. Ruvia could not help but notice how wonderful this time was. In her eyes, it was a moment of special upliftment. She couldn't help but notice how Marie was looking at her intently and asked what it was about. There was a hint of interest in her voice. Marie, a little embarrassed, admitted that the lady looked amazingly beautiful in this outfit. Her words were sincere and full of admiration. Ruvia smiled, noticing that this was indeed the case. She was pleased with her appearance and happily accepted Marie's compliment. The maid, always attentive, added that her mistress was the most beautiful and asked curiously what had prompted Ruvia to choose this particular dress. Ruvia explained that since the beginning of the school year, all students have been wearing the academy uniform, and she just needed this dress to earn some money. Look, the maid sincerely hoped that her mistress was not up to no good. Ruvia, laughing, replied that she was just a silly girl, and there was no need to worry. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and Ruvia looked up to see what was happening. It was a moment of surprise, and everyone's attention was focused on what was happening. One girl was shouting loudly at another, accusing her of unacceptable behavior and demanding an immediate apology. Her words were full of anger and aggression. They were students at the academy, and the one who had just been insulted took the blame and apologized, despite the obvious injustice of what was happening. The insulting girl did not calm down, saying that from the look of her opponent, it was immediately obvious that she was from a lower class. She looked at her with disdain, considering herself superior. Ruvia was not surprised by this conflict. Such situations usually always happened in such institutions, and there was nothing new in such behavior of students. Ruvia hit the girl again without giving her a chance to explain, and asked if she really called that an apology. She didn't believe that they would teach like that in her house. Most likely this girl had no home to speak of. She continued to cry and tried to apologize again, but her words were powerless. Marie asked the lady how they should act in such a situation, what they should do next. The question was sincere because the situation was very difficult. Ruvia asked why she was still standing there. Time was passing, and they had to leave as they were late. The girl reminded him of this, not hiding her impatience. Marie asked if they could help this poor girl. She was in such a miserable state. She sincerely hoped that there was a way to intervene. The lady asked again who they were talking about, meaning the commoner. The maid confirmed that they were talking about her, and this added tension to the conversation. The lady continued that the girl's behavior was completely in keeping with her low origins. Such an attitude was normal for her, which only confirmed her contempt. If this girl really believed herself guilty, she should have gotten down on her knees and begged for forgiveness, like a dog. According to the lady, that was her view of the situation. The girl tried to say at least something in her defense, but the aristocrat shouted at her to quickly carry out her orders without wasting time on empty talk. Ruvia noted that the maid probably knew very well that such situations happened all the time, and they couldn't help everyone who was in trouble. Maria was upset and noted that she understood what was happening. And the lady noted that this option could not be criticized because differences in origin are present even within the academy. The maid agreed with her mistress and confirmed that Ruvia usually did this. She always acted at her own discretion. This was her usual behavior. However, this little brat still didn't understand much. She was just starting to grow up. Ruvia didn't found the academy to watch such childish antics. The lady added that it was impossible to ignore this, and she nevertheless decided to intervene, stepping forward sharply, and without thinking, hitting the aristocrat in the head with her heel. The girl screamed, trying to understand who dared to do this. There was rage and surprise in her voice. She was completely delighted with what happened. The lady's voice came from behind, calmly saying that it was she who initiated it. Ruvia did not hide her intention. The girl was shocked when she saw Princess Ruxana in front of her. Shocked, she could not believe that the lady herself had decided to do such a thing. The lady noticed that this was not done on purpose, and then asked the girl again, who asked her to stand in this place under attack. In response, the girl lowered her eyes, embarrassed, and quietly said that the lady should be more careful next time, not to cause herself unnecessary problems. The lady smiled in response and asked why the girl had not introduced herself earlier. It seemed strange, because she could not help but know who was in front of her. The girl became even more frightened. Her heart began to beat faster. She could not believe that the princess was asking her such questions. The lady repeated in a cold tone that she had asked why the girl had not introduced herself properly. She seemed not to realize who was standing before her. In fear, the girl immediately made a deep bow, introducing herself as the daughter of Viscount Pheline, trying to smooth over the tension and show respect for Ruvia. The lady sighed and wondered why the girl had such a low angle at the knees. Apparently, it was important, because she couldn't understand how she could have positioned her legs like that. The girl's left knee was slightly twisted, and this interested the lady. She, seeing such a moment, asked the question again. Why did she put her right hand on her belt? The lady noticed that the girl seemed to be deliberately tilting her head before bending her back. Perhaps this was a new method of greeting, and she decided to inquire. The aristocrat, despite her bewilderment, asked for forgiveness. However, she said that she would teach the girl, and in order not to leave anything unsaid, suggested that she try again. The princess added without hesitation that she had to bow again, but that it should not be perceived as something wrong. Everything should be done according to the rules. The girl confidently replied that she had been well trained and would do everything as expected. In order not to make a mistake, she promised to follow the advice and would thank the lady later. The lady reminded the girl again to bow her head lower, not to hurry, because in Western culture, modesty and elegance are important elements of behavior. You need to be more refined. After all, the lady approved of her actions. and said that now her greeting corresponded to all the rules of etiquette. She noted that the girl had learned her lesson well. The girl thanked her for her instructions. The lady, in turn, asked if she wanted to continue her studies, since she was ready to give a couple more useful tips. However, the girl, without thinking, immediately bowed. She expressed gratitude for the lesson and declared that this was quite enough for her. She had urgent business to attend to, and excusing herself, she said that she had to leave, but with gratitude for the knowledge she had received. The mistress announced that it was time to leave this place. The maid was absolutely delighted. It was a real miracle for her. Once again, the mistress's heart was able to conquer her feelings. Ruvia couldn't understand what was so special about what was happening around her and why other people were so excited. It all seemed completely foreign and incomprehensible to her. Suddenly, Ruvia heard someone thanking her. This unexpected gesture caught her attention, causing her to stop and look around. Turning around, she noticed a simple girl named Ryudinka, who bowed to her with gratitude. Ryudinka said that she was immensely grateful, because for her sake the lady had done such a deed. Ruvia approached the girl and calmly noted that her actions were not directed specifically at her. It was all for a completely different reason. The lady explained that she wanted to teach a lesson to one of the women who was closer to her world. Maina, it was her personal decision not related to the commoner. Therefore, in her opinion, it was not worth jumping to conclusions. She did not even know that this girl was present here. She had nothing to do with this matter. Despite this, the girl was still touched by the lady's words. She noticed that Ruvia did not really want to inconvenience her. The name was Milia, and she promised herself that she would never forget the gesture that the lady had made for her. It left an indelible mark on her heart. Maria couldn't help but ask again whether the lady really wanted to help this girl. Her doubts were understandable, and she decided to clarify. Ruvia had long ago explained that this was not the case. None of this was about wanting to help or anything like that. She added that they should move on. It was time to leave, and they shouldn't dwell on these disturbing thoughts. All this time, one guy was watching what was happening. In his thoughts, there was a feeling that this girl was a very interesting and unusual freshman. But after thinking a little more, he quickly changed his mind. Perhaps she should be called the future daughter-in-law. The guy could not imagine that his future daughter-in-law would be so charming. He was shocked by her appearance and behavior. He never expected such an impression from her. He was puzzled by the rumors that she was a hermit, because in reality, she did not correspond to this image at all. Where these rumors came from, he could not understand. The prince remarked that Ezekiel should be more careful with his choice of words. He understood that in their world, every word could be important, and he should be more careful. The boy asked Ezekiel not to look at him like that. It was a look that was scary, and he didn't want his older brother to continue looking at him with such intensity. The eyes of the elder brother, the emperor, were truly terrifying. There was something about them that made one feel uneasy, as if they were seeing more than they should. Ezekiel apologized and a little hesitantly asked if it was true that it was better to call them the eyes of the beholder rather than the eyes of the emperor. He was not sure what to call them exactly. Eyes of the beholder. Currently, only one person on the entire continent has this gift, the fourth Prince of Orleans. This is a special ability that allows one to see the essence of things. The eyes of the beholder have the unique ability to discern the truth hidden behind the outer shells. These eyes are considered the symbol of emperors and are often called the eyes of the emperor. The owner of these eyes was destined to become the ruler, and at the moment, a fierce struggle was being waged for the right to inherit power in the Western Empire between the crown prince and the fourth prince. The prince warned that they were not alone in this academy and that they needed to be careful. The battle for power required attention and caution to avoid unnecessary risks. Ezekiel noted that if the crown prince himself was here, then he should be the one on guard, and promised that she would take this into account in her further actions. He also added that the future of the prince's daughter-in-law looks truly exciting and difficult to imagine. These words could not help but draw attention to her extraordinary destiny. This woman is not a hermit at all, but an incredible beauty whose appearance and charisma will outshine anyone in the empire. People like her can be found only on the fingers of one hand. Regarding the way she communicated with the Viscount's daughter, he could not help but note her behavior. It was real perfection. Her charm left no one indifferent. Ezekiel asked for his opinion of the princess, asking him to share the first impressions he could give about her character and behavior at this academy. The fourth prince replied that she was beautiful, which surprised the guy a little. After all, this was clearly not enough to express all his thoughts and feelings about the princess. In response to his comment, the fourth prince simply remained silent. The boy realized that there was no point in discussing this topic with him anymore. There was clearly nothing new here. This reaction was quite in keeping with his style, but the boy still couldn't help but wonder why the crown prince had appeared at the academy again. After completing the mandatory 2 years of training, he had already completed all the necessary courses, and now it was completely unclear why he was here again, and in the role of a temporary teacher, which seemed strange and not entirely logical. The fourth prince noted that he was not at all clear about the crown prince's goals. He could not understand what exactly he was planning. His actions seemed mysterious, and nothing gave clear clues. The reason is said to be that the crown prince missed the academy, but the fourth prince himself does not believe this. He is sure that no one in their right mind would take such a reason seriously. The fourth prince could not even guess what was behind such intentions, thinking them to be simply ridiculous. In his eyes, it was like playing with fire too dangerous to trust. Today, the prince is completely absent. His absence is a source of confusion for all who expect his active participation, and no one can understand what he is doing at this moment. According to rumors, the fourth prince heard that the crown prince was currently in the casino. This only increased his surprise and even displeasure. Ezekiel could not forgive him for this. The fourth prince noted that perhaps the crown prince did not come here to continue his games, but to rest. However, he was sure that his actions should be forgotten. Ezekiel couldn't understand how such behavior could be easily forgotten. And more importantly, he was uneasy about even telling his older brother about it. The whole thing was confusing to him. The fourth prince said that he was not worried about it. His opinion was clear. However, it seemed that the younger brother was still worried, which made the situation even more tense. He also asked if Ezekiel had finished his dissertation, hinting that he must have a lot on his plate. This prompted Ezekiel to consider how important his studies might be. Ezekiel flinched a little at the question, quickly answering that he had not come here to do these serious matters. He wanted to relax and enjoy the moment, forgetting about work. Ezekiel declared that he would go first to save time, while the fourth prince remained where he was continuing to look down, lost in thought. His thoughts were taking him far from the current situation. The maid, seeing all this, asked again whether the mistress really intended to work here. Her questions were filled with anxiety and uncertainty, which only emphasized the strange atmosphere in the air. Ruvia wondered if there were really issues worth addressing, and if she thought they were important. She was a little worried, but she wasn't sure. Marie replied that there were certainly problems because it was a casino and there was always a risk. This place attracted people who were used to gambling. As they walked, shouts, laughter, and excited cries could be heard. The aristocrats did not restrain themselves. They spent large sums of money absorbed in games without any doubts. Yes, this entire building is connected to the casino, and it is clear that the gentlemen expect to profit from the gambling that takes place here every day. Marie insisted that she and the lady leave this place before it was too late, because such games could be dangerous for anyone. Ruvia calmly replied that there was no need to worry, because she was good at playing cards and could keep everything under control, even if the atmosphere was tense. The maid reminded that it was not the way she played, but the process itself. Gambling here attracts people suffering from addiction. It is not safe. Ruvia smiled and stated that she didn't look like a person addicted to games, and asked again if the maid was exaggerating the situation. The maid clarified that she did not mean her personally, but the very nature of gambling is always a risk, especially for those who cannot stop. Ruvia agreed that the maid was right, but she was determined to do something a little different, and was not going to give in to this dangerous atmosphere. You could call it a game of justice. The maid didn't quite understand what it really meant to those mistresses. She only guessed at the meaning of their words, but she clearly felt the tension of the situation. There are certainly those in this place who use dishonest methods. These people win money by deceiving others. Their cunning and sophistication are conspicuous, creating anxiety. Ruvia decides that these are the people she wants to rob. Her goal is to punish the swindlers and deprive them of what they have so easily gained by dishonest means. In her thoughts, the fight against injustice. Of course, she has good intentions, but taking money from swindlers is becoming almost a game. It is a business full of profit, and even moral principles do not stop her. Although Ruvia herself understands that it brings pleasure, because it reminds her of the old days when she herself did similar things. She can't help but remember how cleverly she deceived people, setting traps for them. First, Ruvia decides to win some money at the dice. 20 cents is not a huge amount, but it is enough to try her luck. There is no particular risk, but there is still excitement. Marie, noticing that the game is getting out of control, tries to help the lady. She suggests betting another amount, which she thinks is more reasonable, but Ruvia continues to stick to her plan. Ruvia, hearing the maid's remarks, answers with a smile. She reminded her that she herself had recently said that gambling was evil, but now it seemed she didn't care anymore. The maid, seeing that Ruvia is not going to back down, gives into doubts. She admits that she does not know what is going on, but Ruvia was firm in her decision. They must win at any cost. Marie was thrilled when they earned their first 200 cents. She immediately began dreaming of more, imagining how they would soon become real rich. Ruvia remained more reserved. However, Ruvia realizes that it is impossible to make money from gambling. She looks at the maid, thinking about how pointless such games are, despite all the winnings. Maria is surprised when Ruvia stands up and heads for the exit. She says that they are winning and that it would be stupid to leave now since luck is on their side. But Ruvia remains adamant. Ruvia decides it's time to play another game. She prepares for the next stage of their plan, which is much more important and ambitious than just winning the dice. Everything is going according to her plan. The maid, noticing that Ruvia is serious, asks if they should continue. She suggests that they put all the games aside and just enjoy the process. But Ruvia firmly rejects her suggestion. Ruvia replies that if they are already here, there is no point in wasting time. They must do everything to complete their task. She is determined to try to get more. Ruvia asks, how about the 3,000 cents from the maid? She tries to convince her mistress that such an amount is quite possible. Ruvia is confident that luck will be on their side. In such a huge casino full of gamblers, there are bound to be those who try to cheat the system. After all, where big money is circulating, there are always scammers. A family could live for a whole year on 3,000 cents without denying themselves anything. Such an amount would allow them to forget about poverty and live quite comfortably. If she manages to earn this money, she will be able to stop thinking about financial problems for some time. And if the win is even bigger, she will not get out of bed at all. She was looking around the room, trying to figure out who might be a good fit. At that moment, she heard a man complaining that he had been counting on a flush, but the cards were not what he expected. Everyone around him was watching his game, with interest, discussing how much money he had already managed to earn. The curiosity of the spectators only grew, because it is not every day that you get to see someone win large sums. The focus was on a boy with ash blonde hair, playing with incredible confidence. His coolness betrayed a man who was used to taking risks and knew exactly what he was doing. His face was both cunning and calculating. He was a born con man, and Ruvia realized that this man was perfect for her purposes. A moment later, he turned to a woman nearby and with a slight smile invited her to sit at the table and play together. It was to Ruvia that he approached, inviting her to take part in the game. She did not hesitate and readily agreed. The man asked her if she knew the rules of poker, since that was what they were going to play. Ruvia answered confidently. She was well acquainted with the rules of this game. Hearing this, the man smiled even wider and said that this was wonderful, so they could begin. He added that, if something is unclear, don't be shy about asking. Everyone is here to enjoy the game. Then he deftly shuffled the deck, finally inviting them to begin the game. The first few games went as usual, without any unexpected events. It seemed that the opponents were simply testing each other without revealing all their cards. But in the fifth game, the situation changed dramatically. When Ruvia looked at her opponent's cards, she noticed that luck was clearly on his side this time. His combination looked too good to be a fluke. She smiled immediately, guessing that this could not have happened without his cunning tricks. The game was developing too suspiciously, and she had no doubt that he was cheating again. He watched her reaction carefully and concluded that this beautiful lady wanted to tell him something. However, he was in no hurry to start the conversation. But Ruvia only calmly replied that she was simply waiting for the next move, which would decide the outcome of the game. She did not show any excitement, but inside she already knew that something was fishy. To her surprise, the trick this guy pulled off was not just a simple cheat, but real magic. He wasn't just cleverly juggling cards. Supernatural powers were at work. At the crucial moment, he used teleportation magic, changing the arrangement of the cards right before everyone's eyes. It was so fast and unnoticeable that an ordinary player would not have suspected anything. In one move, he created a top-level combination perfectly played and devoid of any trace of interference. Such skill could deceive even the most experienced players. No matter how skillful a person was, he would not be able to win against such a sophisticated cheater. The only chance of winning was to figure out his trick and catch him in a lie. If the player can do it, of course. Ruvia calmly stated that she had a combination ready. Her voice was even, but something strange flashed in her eyes. Unfortunately, his cards were stronger. He had a flush, 3. Ruvia just chuckled, saying that she would probably stop there. She apologized and hinted that it was time to finish. Against her, the one who is able to sense the smallest fluctuations of mana, who literally feels their movement. Using magic in a card game with her is like laying your cards on the table, as any changes in the flow of mana will not go unnoticed. The man remarked in admiration that this was simply unbelievable. He had been playing cards for many years, but had never met such an amazing player before. The lady noted with a slight smile that this was the first time she had encountered such a wonderful person. There was obvious sarcasm in her voice, but the man, not catching the mockery, took it as a sincere compliment, became embarrassed, and sighed heavily, hiding his embarrassment. Even in defeat, the fact that such a charming lady called him a good man lifted his spirits and gave him confidence. The girl watched him with interest, amazed that he still hadn't understood the sarcasm. Then, with a slight smile, she suggested that they play the last round for high stakes. The lady clarified his intentions, and the man, with a slight excitement in his voice, confirmed. If so, then all the money would be at stake. She just shrugged, saying that she only had 1,000 sen, and added that in that case, he would most likely be playing at a loss. The man calmly replied that in the worst case he would lose 2,000, and judging by his tone, this suited him just fine. But there was one condition. If the man won, she had to fulfill his request. This proposal sounded unexpected, and the lady became wary, suspecting a catch. Gazprom was surprised and asked what was going on. The man calmly explained that if luck was on his side, he wanted to spend the day with her. The lady was indignant. She was outraged that he dared to make such a demand. She decided that before her stood either a joker or a man who lacked common sense. Rising from her seat, she coldly declared that she had no intention of agreeing to such conditions. The refusal was categorical, and she did not even think of changing her decision. The man flinched, slightly startled by her reaction. He didn't understand why she was rejecting his offer so abruptly, as if it were something offensive. The lady noted mockingly that he hadn't even offered 20,000, so he thought he could buy her attention for just 2,000. She was both amused and angry. In his eyes, she looked cheap, and that was what irritated her the most. It was unpleasant for her to realize that he didn't even try to hide his assessment. The crown prince suddenly bowed, asking for forgiveness for his impudence. He then proposed another option, hoping that she would still agree. He admitted that 2,000 was indeed little, but he had another proposal: just have tea with her. It seemed more innocent and less provocative. The lady nodded in agreement. This was already acceptable. She was so confident of her victory that she saw no reason to refuse him such a trifle. They began to play. Each of them had to take 3 cards and then reveal them. The fate of their dispute depended on just these few moves. When the man revealed his cards, his combination was 777. He smirked smugly, glancing at Ruvia as if he was already celebrating his victory, confident in his luck. Ruvia accepted the challenge calmly, without showing any emotion. She laid out her combination on the table. 222. There was confidence in her eyes, although the cards did not seem to promise her victory. The atmosphere around was heating up. It was now clear that Ruvia had a strong hand. The tension was growing, and the outcome of this game no longer seemed so predictable. Soon, they each received 5 additional cards. The man only had to wait for a quad. If luck was on his side, it would ensure his unconditional victory. A quad was a combination of 4 cards of the same rank. The man watched the hand, closely wondering if luck would turn to his favor at this late hour. Ruvia watched her opponent calmly and told him to draw cards. He knew he only needed to change 1 card to win, and now was the perfect time to do it. Suddenly, she felt a surge of magical energy. Everything became clear. He had used the spell on his last card, as she had suspected from the very beginning. The man raised his head and asked if their agreement was still in force. His voice was confident, but his eyes showed hidden excitement and anticipation of the outcome. Ruvia nodded, confirming that everything was still according to the rules. However, before they could talk about the consequences, they had to determine the winner of this game. They looked at the man's cards at the same time. 4 sevens, 4 of a kind. Everyone around him was sure he had won. It seemed obvious, but suddenly a voice rang out. Ruvia had to show her cards. She did so, and a flash royale appeared on the table. Everyone froze in amazement. No one expected this. The crown prince, watching the game closely, noticed that the lady was clearly celebrating her victory. He acknowledged her triumph and added that the game had been tense and that he had played well. But it wasn't only the crown prince who knew how to cheat. The lady was confident in her abilities and knew how to beat her opponent because in gambling, not only luck wins, but also intelligence. It was an almost impossible coincidence that both a quad and a royal flush came up at the same time. She had obviously planned this round in advance, and every move had been strictly according to her plan. She foresaw that the prince would try to influence the cards with magic, and created a situation in which he would inevitably receive a quadruple, leaving himself only the strongest layout. So, following her plan, fate itself gave her the highest combination of cards, leaving her opponent no chance of winning. As a result, their winnings amounted to a whole 4,000, and for now, this amount should be enough to not think about money for some time. The lady won absolutely everything, leaving her opponent without a single coin. She even felt a little sorry for the crown prince, whom she had so cleverly outplayed. Meanwhile, the prince leaned back in his chair and admitted that the game had been exciting. He called the game an honor for himself and enjoyed the moment, despite the defeat. Intrigued, he looked at his rival and politely asked if he could find out her name, since such an intelligent and beautiful woman should definitely not remain a stranger. The lady, without expressing any particular emotion, calmly replied that her name was Ruvia, without adding anything extra. The crown prince smiled slightly, turned to her, and looking thoughtfully into her eyes, noticed that her name was very beautiful, and for some reason he was sure that their paths would cross again. Ruvia answered without hesitation that she doubted it. However, the prince was adamant and with easy confidence declared that she was mistaken because their meeting was inevitable. The lady did not argue. She simply turned and, without looking back, walked away, leaving the prince alone with his thoughts. When they returned to the restaurant, the maid was shocked. They had not 400 in their hands, but 4,000. She could not believe that they had hit such a big jackpot, but she was worried about something else. If the bag of money was left open, someone would definitely steal it. She had to be careful not to lose everything in an instant. But Ruvia was adamant. She firmly declared that she would not give a single coin to anyone. This money belonged to them, and she did not intend to part with it. The lady kindly offered the young man a meal and wished him a pleasant appetite. However, deep down, she knew that this guy had guessed her machinations and understood perfectly well that she was cheating. The last look of the young man left no doubt. He had guessed everything. There was no malice in his eyes, only a slight grin, as if he had known in advance how it would all end and was not going to expose her. However, surprisingly, he said nothing. Why did he just keep silent instead of confronting her? It remained a mystery, and it made her feel uneasy. What was especially alarming was the way he said the words about meeting again. They sounded confident, as if he knew for sure that their paths would cross again. The maid carefully asked her mistress who, in her opinion, this mysterious guy was. Maria noted that he was very attractive. The lady, instead of answering, looked away thoughtfully. She had a feeling that this young man reminded her of someone, but she could not yet understand who exactly. However, what impressed her even more than his appearance was his magical abilities. The way he teleported the cards without leaving a trace showed a skill that no ordinary mage could possess. Simple mana users are not capable of such tricks. This was something beyond the pale, a level that only supreme mages can reach, and there are only a few of them in the Empire. There were no more than 20 of them in the entire Western Empire. She simply couldn't help but know each of them. Was this a man standing before her whose name should be known to every mage? The young high mage, after some thought, it finally dawned on her. This guy was the crown prince of the Western Empire, Vildeheim. He had the most outstanding magical talent in history. However, if it was really him, what would the crown prince be doing in such a place? She couldn't find an explanation. Ruvia decided that there was no point in wasting time thinking about it. This man would never appear in her life again, and there was no point in thinking about him. She had earned a little money. Why not allow herself a little spending now? They entered an expensive boutique full of elegant clothes. The maid looked around in surprise, realizing that for the first time she found herself in such a luxurious place where every detail screamed wealth. She turned to Ruvia and enthusiastically offered to help her choose a dress. There was confidence in her voice that anything would suit her mistress because anything would look amazing on her. However, Ruvia only calmly replied that she did not need new clothes. All this was not started for her at all. The purchases were intended for Maria. The girl was stunned by such a statement. She looked at the lady in confusion, trying to understand whether she had heard wrong, and carefully asked again whether it was really so. Meanwhile, Ruvia approached the salesperson with a request to select for Maria several casual outfits, as well as a couple of formal dresses of the highest quality without the slightest expense. The maid immediately noticed that all this was too expensive for her. It seemed impossible to her to wear such expensive clothes intended for people of a completely different status. But Ruvia calmly replied that she was not doing this for the maid, but for herself. These words only confused the girl even more. She did not understand at all what exactly her mistress meant. Ruvia firmly stated that it irritated her when someone judged her subordinates based on their appearance alone. She considered it unfair and did not allow anyone to speak disparagingly of them. Now she was the only one who was so close to the lady. However, she felt extremely awkward, trying on all these outfits, despite their luxurious appearance and impeccable tailoring. Apparently, she really enjoyed it. For such a lively reaction, one could spare neither time nor money. The pleasure was clearly worth it. It was important to her that a person could experience such moments during life, because after death, all this loses all meaning and nothing matters anymore. While there is an opportunity, it is necessary to appreciate the moments spent with loved ones and enjoy them without putting off joy for later. The girl felt sincere gratitude to the lady. She promised to make even greater efforts to justify the trust placed in her. There was another shop ahead, and the maid couldn't hide her surprise. How much money could they spend? She was amazed by their stamina and desire to continue shopping. When Ruvia returned to her room, she plopped down tiredly on her bed, saying that she was completely exhausted after a long day and could not go on any longer. All she wanted was to rest. She said that she would have to leave for 70 hours, and she did not know how to survive it because the time would be filled with many obligations and worries. The journey turned out to be long. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and Ruvia was puzzled, not understanding who it could be, especially at such a late time when everyone should have been resting. When the maid opened the door, she literally shuddered, seeing the prince on the threshold. It was unexpected, and the maid could not hide her fear, not understanding why he was here. The prince asked if Ruvia was a first-year student named Ruvia Ruxin. His voice was confident, and he was clearly expecting a specific answer, unaware of the emotions it would evoke in her. Ruvia, a little taken aback, confirmed his words, answering that it was she. Then curiously she asked who he was, what brought him to her room on such a night. The prince introduced himself as Orleans Lon Hostia, and at that moment, Ruvia realized that he was the fourth prince. She was shocked, not believing her ears, thinking that there was some mistake. Ruvia couldn't believe that he was really who she had heard about. She could hardly resist asking him again if she had understood his idea correctly. The prince, in turn, bowed to her with respect. This was unexpected, and Ruvia, still not believing what was happening, bowed her head in response, also introducing herself with her full name. Ruvia couldn't understand what the prince was doing in her room. She didn't want to meet him, but despite that, he came here himself, violating her personal space. He apologized for the lateness of his visit, explaining that as a village headman, he could not ignore his duties and that he had an important matter to attend to that could not be delayed. The prince noted that she had managed to handle the situation well, but there had been reports that she had been seen gambling at a casino for a large sum. He could not ignore this fact. The prince reminded her that such behavior was an offense that would be punished. He said that she would be expected before a disciplinary committee tomorrow morning for an investigation. And without waiting for an answer, he abruptly slammed the door behind him and left, leaving Ruvia in complete confusion and even greater bewilderment, not knowing what to do. The maid asked anxiously what they would do now. The mistress, without losing her composure, replied that sometimes you just have to accept it because such situations happen. The maid was surprised by how indifferently the mistress reacted. This was the disciplinary committee, and she didn't seem to care. This behavior astounded the maid. The lady suggested that they simply go to bed. Marie, a little worried, reminded them that school had not even begun, and the punishment could be very strict and unpleasant. Ruvia, thinking, remembered that at least she had managed to spend money on necessary things. The problem was that she didn't know who could complain about her. Her main goal at the moment was to pass probation or get suspended from classes, which would give her the opportunity to do nothing legally. The headman said that the punishment would be for her to clean the floors in the classrooms. This was suggested as a measure aimed at correcting her behavior. The lady remarked that this punishment seemed too soft to her. She believed that something more serious and appropriate was needed for such actions. The prince, hearing this, asked in surprise if she really thought such a punishment was too light. He could not believe that she was so critical. The lady firmly stated that she truly believed this. Despite her status, she felt that her behavior required much more serious consequences than simple punishment. She stressed that he should give her probation or suspension so that the punishment would fit her offense. The prince noticed that Ruvia admitted her guilt and was ready to accept a fair punishment. This was truly commendable. He could not help but notice her honesty in this matter. Ruvia said she didn't need any compliments. It was always important for her to remain honest without hiding anything. Her words confirmed her self-confidence and independence. The prince had the eyes of a contemplator who saw the essence of everything that was happening and could expose any lie, even the most hidden. This quality often irritated those around him. He knew that his ability to see the truth, to uncover masks, would not help him to find out her true nature. Ruvia was too cunning and knew how to hide her true thoughts. In any case, Ruvia was categorically against doing the cleaning. She decided that a probationary period was the best solution. Working according to the rules seemed much more reasonable to her. She thought that either suspension or expulsion were the best options. Cleaning was not something she cared about at all. The prince, noticing her firm conviction, asked if she really preferred a more severe punishment. His interest was sincere, and he wanted to understand her point of view. Ruvia confirmed her words, and then the prince said that he had actually chosen cleaning for her. He thought it would be a reasonable solution for the situation. Regardless of what she had done, the prince believed that to apply too severe a punishment immediately upon her admission would be overly cruel and unfair. Ruvia was sure that his decision was connected with the fact that she had become his fiancée. She thought that it was an act of his excessive mercy, although it could have been a mistake. The man noted that she had every right to think so. But in fact, his decision was based on the fact that their union was one of convenience, and it would be wrong to start with such a severe punishment. Ruvia realized that this was unnecessary politeness on his part. She had her own affairs, and she believed that personal relationships and social obligations should be separated. Ruvia said that he should adhere to the established rules of the academy and punish her accordingly as required by the charter. She believed that rules were important for discipline. To make other students understand how serious the consequences could be, she suggested a punishment of suspension, which she believed would demonstrate strictness. The gentleman agreed with her proposal and stated that he would decide her punishment by suspending her for 5 days from all classes and participation in the life of the academy during this period. Ruvia quickly realized that these 5 days would give her complete isolation from the daily worries of the academy. She was fine with it, and she did not particularly dislike the decision. 5 days passed, and she felt rested. This period allowed her to gain strength, and now she wanted to take a short walk in the fresh air. 2 centuries ago, the situation in this place would have been completely different. The main building where it was located was destroyed by fire and then rebuilt using new technologies. Thinking back to what had happened before, Ruvia felt a little sad. It had been an important moment in her life, and although much had changed, something inside her had remained the same. Time had taken away much that was dear to her. Only her soul remained filled with memories of the past, which she often carried in her thoughts, reflecting on the days gone by. It was natural considering how many years had passed. Since then, time leaves its mark, and she knew she had to learn to let go of what could never be returned. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a stone standing nearby. Ruvia looked at it and thought that this stone held important memories from her past. The stone she remembered was indeed the same one on which the children had left their inscriptions when the building was being built. Those words and the memories of them came alive in her mind. Ruvia remembered how she had once angrily scolded her children for scratching the stone with a knife. But now looking back, she felt only nostalgia and regret for those times. All the children that Ruvia met in her past life had gone through incredible hardships. Each of them had gone through many trials and experienced pain that was difficult to bear. She hopes that now that all this is behind them, they have found the peace they longed for. Perhaps they have found their inner strength and have finally been able to forget about their suffering. When she died, Ruvia's soul was immediately reborn in another body, that of a young girl, and less than a month passed before she regained life, starting over with a clean slate. Perhaps her death is now being actively discussed in the central part of the world because she was a famous person who left a noticeable mark. Her passing has undoubtedly become a topic of conversation. All those who tried to save her died one after another before her eyes. It was hard to see, especially when they left, despite their efforts and hopes. She thought they were fools because she herself had long since stopped wanting to live. Everything was so painful that the thought of continuing to fight was alien to her. Ruvia decided she had had enough. There was no point in replaying memories of her past life and constantly crying. Her soul had been demanding peace for a long time, and she herself was already tired of everything. She promised herself that she would have a good rest because she had worked so hard. Now it was time for a well-deserved rest and recuperation for a new chapter in her life. She noticed her, the girl who had fallen asleep, under a tree, right under the tree where she had once rested. Everything seemed so familiar and at the same time new. Ruvia heard the master's voice, asking her to sleep a little longer. Noticing how tired she looked, he spoke calmly and caringly, as if he knew her condition. When she opened her eyes, she saw the same guy she had met at the casino standing in front of her. He was right there, his gaze as attentive as before. He noted that they were meeting again, smiled and called her "lovely lady." It was unexpected, but there was a warmth in his words that made her feel important. Ruvia didn't say a word, but her silence spoke for itself. The man immediately realized that his appearance did not bring her any joy, but rather the opposite. She calmly noted that she had no particular desire to talk to those who were informing on her. There was no anger in her voice, but there was a cold undertone to her words. The man was surprised to the depths of his soul. He couldn't even immediately find what to say. So unexpected was this turn in the conversation for him. Then he decided to ask how she knew that it was he who had reported it. However, Ruvia calmly replied that she did not know for sure. She just guessed. Her words left the man stumped. He didn't know how to react. The meaning of her phrase eluded him, and his confusion only grew. Ruvia explained that she had simply said it as a guess, but judging by his reaction, it turned out that she had hit the nail on the head. It really was him. Now everything fit. His words in the casino, this meeting, the circumstances, everything pointed to him. He was the prime suspect, even if he didn't realize it. The man noticed with a bitter smile that she had outplayed him again. However, he asked her not to jump to conclusions and not to think too badly of him. After all, he was her teacher, albeit a temporary one, and so he couldn't turn a blind eye to the students' violations. He told her everything only for her own good. A teacher who goes to a casino and cheats? It even sounded funny. Ruvia didn't continue the conversation. She thought it was time to go back to her room. If he had nothing more to add, she asked him to leave. She wanted to get some sleep, and his presence only interfered with her rest. The man sighed and said he was sorry. He was glad to see her again, even though she was as heartless as he had thought. She didn't even ask who he was, but Ruvia calmly replied that she didn't see the need for that. She already knew everything. Ruvia addressed the young man with respect, calling him not only prince, but also by his name, which in itself was unexpected. There was no doubt or hesitation in her voice. Prince Wildheim froze, astonished to the depths of his soul. He couldn't even immediately find what to say. So surprising was this address for him. Collecting his thoughts, he asked how long she had known his name, or perhaps she was just guessing again, as she had done before, playing with words. After all, who else possessing such a level of magic at such a young age could teach, if not him, the crown prince? This conclusion seemed to him the only logical one. The lady, however, simply smiled and greeted him with restraint, expressing her joy at their meeting. The guy noted to himself that she was not at all surprised by the fact that he was the crown prince. She, in turn, clarified why this moment should surprise her at all. For her, it was not something out of the ordinary, but rather a natural state of affairs. If their meeting had taken place a month earlier, these circumstances would have forced him to bow in return. But times are changing, and now everything is different. Ruvia had seen a lot in her long life. Such things could no longer truly surprise her. They all seemed trivial to her compared to what she had experienced. Despite this unexpected meeting, she made it clear that she had business to attend. To Ruvia, noted that she was undoubtedly flattered, but had to leave him not wanting to waste time on idle talk. She was irritated by his persistent attentions and found conversation with him completely uninteresting. She frankly stated that she would prefer that he simply leave her alone. However, as soon as she turned around, her ears caught an unexpected sound. The prince laughed. This made her turn around and look at him with slight bewilderment. The young man, without hiding his smile, noted that he had never met such an interesting and unusual person before. There was something special about her, unlike the others. Ruvia only chuckled at the words, and without false modesty, noted that she was well aware of her attractiveness. However, looking at her interlocutor, she warned, falling in love with her was not the best idea. The crown prince did not remove the smile from his face, and slightly bowing his head, asked her why she thought so. There was obvious interest in his voice, as if he expected to hear something unexpected. The lady only frowned, not understanding what he was getting at. It all seemed strange to her, even absurd. What was this man even talking about? The prince, not paying attention to her bewilderment, noticed that she really did have incredible charm. And in his opinion, it was simply impossible to avoid falling in love with such a woman. Perhaps he had already begun to have special feelings for her. However, Ruvia, raising an eyebrow slightly, replied that the prince was not at all good at joking. But the man immediately assured her that he was absolutely serious. There was not a trace of mockery in his voice, and this only increased her wariness. Ruvia froze and said nothing more. She didn't know how to react. The words had thrown her off balance, and for the first time in a long time, she had no answer. The prince suddenly decided it was time for him to leave. He admitted that it was not the best time to visit, but before he left, he wanted to give her a special gift. And as if by chance, he added that Ruvia was the first one who could interest him so much. A mysterious light flashed in his eyes. Then, without waiting for her reaction, he used magic. Ruvia immediately understood what he was doing. She had encountered similar spells before. Normal extraction magic takes everything in an object, leaving an empty shell. But his technique was different. He only took the pollen from her clothes. Such precision in managing magic was astonishing. It was truly amazing because even among magicians, such skill was extremely rare. He was called the Great Master of the Magic Tower, the Mage of the Black Constellation, and now Ruvia understood why. When he had finished his task, he calmly said that that was all. There was no doubt in his voice. He knew he had done the right thing, and he hoped that it had helped her. Before he disappeared, he promised that their meeting would not be the last. And for some reason, Ruvia had no doubt that this was true. Ruvia remembered the look on his face when he asked that very question. Why shouldn't he fall in love with her? There was a genuine misunderstanding in his eyes, and it made her slightly irritated. Then she thought that he was too intrusive, and it was tiring her out more and more. His constant questions, close attention, and incessant attempts to get closer were a heavy burden for her. Not only was the fourth prince already living in the academy, but now the crown prince was not far behind. His increased interest in her was causing unnecessary inconvenience and drawing unnecessary attention to her. Ruvia dreamed of finally being left alone. She didn't need any intrigues or special attention from high-ranking people. She just wanted to live without unnecessary worries. Suddenly, her ears caught someone talking nearby. The voices sounded quite loud, and this attracted her attention. She involuntarily listened. interested in what they were talking about. It was a group of guys who were asking another young man about some cleaning. Their questions sounded with obvious bewilderment, as if they themselves did not fully understand what was being discussed. Ruvia assumed that these guys had also received some kind of punishment, perhaps for breach of discipline or impudent behavior. Otherwise, why would they do such things? They said that this kind of work was quite suitable for him, but that they themselves were completely unsuitable for such activities. Their tone clearly conveyed dissatisfaction and disagreement with the situation. They were persistent in trying to get an answer from him, wondering why he was silent. In their opinion, they did not look like cleaners at all, and this seemed extremely unfair to them. After a short pause, the guy finally answered, admitting that they might be right, and that such work really wasn't right for them. However, his interlocutors didn't stop and continued to question him. The boys laughed at his words, noting that this was a very reasonable conclusion. Their laughter was loud and mocking, as if they had known in advance what conclusion he would come to. In their opinion, cleaning should be done by someone who really enjoys it. So without further ado, they thrust a mop into his hands, making it clear that this responsibility now fell on him. The guy sighed heavily and reluctantly agreed, saying that since that was the case, he would also do the cleaning. However, his voice clearly showed dissatisfaction with what was happening. When he paused for a moment, the boys immediately raised their voices, demanding that he answer. Their tone was becoming increasingly irritated, and they were not going to leave him alone. He looked down, knowing he had no choice. There was already a bruise on his face, reminding him that there was no point in arguing with them. The lady came up behind her and, trying to speak calmly, asked if she was disturbing their conversation. Her voice was soft, but there was a note of curiosity in it, and her eyes were attentive. The boys turned around at once to see who had addressed them, and when they saw the girl, they froze in place. In front of them stood Princess Ruvia, Ruxin herself, an aristocrat who was impossible not to recognize. Realizing who they were dealing with, the young men immediately bowed their heads in respect. They greeted the lady politely, emphasizing her title, and then quickly introduced themselves, stating not only their names but also the year they were studying. The lady looked at them carefully and asked in a reserved tone what was going on. She knew that both boys did not belong to noble families and could not boast of prestigious origins, but the situation still raised questions. The young men hastened to assure her that nothing unusual was happening. They were just doing their job and did not want her to worry about trifles. They had nothing to hide, and therefore there was no need to attach unnecessary importance to this conversation. However, the lady was not in the mood to leave things as they were. She took a deep breath, realizing that if she just left now, she would think about it for a long time. She wanted to quickly deal with these unpleasant types and leave this place. Her gaze shifted to the guy standing slightly behind her. Something about him caught her attention, and she asked him point blank what his name was, expecting an immediate answer. The young man looked at her and quietly said his name, Basner. The princess frowned slightly, looking at him intently, and asked if he was sure of what he was saying and if he really fully understood the situation he was in. Then she repeated her question, but more firmly, more demandingly. Was he really willing to leave everything as it was and continue to put up with the situation he found himself in? These words made the boys tense up. They looked at each other, and their faces became more serious. The thought that the situation could get out of control suddenly made them nervous. However, the lady did not look away and addressed Basner directly. She pointed out that this role was being unfairly imposed on him, and he was simply doing nothing, as if he did not understand what was being done to him. She made it clear that if he didn't start fighting for himself, nothing in his life would change. He would have to continue to endure humiliation until he decided to say enough. Her voice softened slightly, but there was still an insistence in it. She asked if he was okay with this, and if he was going to put up with it any longer. If he has even a drop of desire to change something, she is ready to help him. But he will have to act himself, and the choice is his alone. The lady warned that it would not be easy. Finding courage is one of the most difficult tests, and not everyone is able to pass it. But maybe that was pointless. She didn't know all the circumstances of his life and couldn't judge what was best for him to do. The lady apologized for interfering in the situation and admitted that she might have said too much. One of the guys chuckled and advised the princess not to waste her time on people like Basner. In his opinion, there was simply no point. Everyone was gossiping that this guy was the most cowardly person in their department. No one took him seriously, considering him a weakling. The lady, having heard this, only shrugged her shoulders and indifferently noted that perhaps this was true. The young man, hearing this, grinned and without further objection said that this was precisely why he was going to clean up. He seemed not at all eager to argue or justify himself. But the lady only grimaced in obvious disgust. Just looking at them was unpleasant to her. Without saying a word, she demanded a bucket of water, picked it up, and without thinking, threw it right on one of the guys. The young man, drenched in water, stood frozen in shock, his face showing complete shock. He could not believe what was happening, and stuttering asked what the lady was doing. The lady, not paying attention to his shocked look, calmly replied that she was challenging him to a duel. The boy blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. His confusion amused the lady, and she repeated the question with a hint of mockery. Did he really have problems with his hearing? She really was challenging them to a duel. Then, narrowing her eyes, she asked if they wanted to know why. The answer was simple. She just didn't like their faces. The boys were dumbfounded when they heard this. They looked at each other, but no one knew how to react to it. The lady continued in the same tone. In her opinion, cleaning would suit them much better than the boy they were making fun of. So the issue had to be settled once and for all. She proposed the terms: whoever lost would do the cleaning. In this duel, she would represent that same cowardly guy. The lady's words caused a storm of emotions. The guys who had recently been lost were now noticeably angry. One of them, plucking up his courage, sharply declared that she shouldn't joke like that. He reminded her that despite her status as a princess, he had no intention of allowing anyone to mock the honor of a knight. The lady raised an eyebrow, as if doubting what she had heard, and asked again if he really was doubting her words. After all, she already said everything very clearly. She simply doesn't like these people, and there couldn't be a better reason for a duel. Ruvia looked at the boy with a slight smile and challenged him without flinching. If he was truly not afraid, then let him raise his sword. No matter what happened, no one would hold them accountable. Besides, fighting them with her bare hands would be too cruel. In a generous spirit, she decided to use only a simple mop to even the odds a little. One of the guys was already seething with anger. It seemed to him that this impudent mockery was going beyond all bounds. His face turned red, and he clenched his fists in irritation. Ruvia looked at him carefully and offered another condition. If they were in doubt, let them attack together. She would acknowledge their victory if they even touched the hem of her robe. The insulted guy couldn't stand it and rushed at her with a scream, waving his sword. He was sure that he would make her regret the words she had said. But his efforts were in vain. Ruvia dodged it with lightning speed, without even putting in much effort. Her movements were light and precise. She chuckled and noted that he should have taken a real sword if he expected even the slightest chance of hitting her. Then, using the mop, she deftly parried his attack, causing the opponent to lose his balance. He lost his footing and flew off to the side with a loud noise. Her fighting style was precise and minimalistic. She always acted ahead of the curve, attacking quickly and economically, without unnecessary movements. The next moment, she not only seized the initiative, but also dealt him a sharp blow to the head, not allowing him to come to his senses. The only thing that slightly upset Ruvia was the pain in her arm. She had to apply too much force, and now her joints ached unpleasantly. However, the boy was not going to give up so easily. He tried to strike back, but Ruvia easily parried the attack and hit him again with the mop. He fell again, and Ruvia noticed that she had already told her companions that they could attack together. It was a clear reminder, as their strength clearly left much to be desired. Ruvia's body was weakened, and she had difficulty wielding an iron sword. However, despite her physical weakness, her martial arts skills allowed her to remain at her best in combat. Even if the opponents are 10 times stronger, her knowledge of combat techniques will give her an advantage. One precise strike, and she will be able to defeat them without losing control. If her opponents didn't have magic, they wouldn't be able to defeat her. Ruvia understood this and was prepared for any surprises, confident in her skills. One of the boys grabbed his sword and declared that he wasn't done yet. However, Ruvia only laughed, surprised to see that they dared to act so provocatively. The boys, irritated by her laughter, shouted at her to shut up and tried to attack her, but no matter what they did, it was all useless, and they couldn't cope with her courage. But suddenly something happened to her legs. Ruvia felt her strength begin to fade, and she froze, trying to figure out what had happened before she lost her balance. When one of the boys tried to hit her, Basner shouted at them to stop, his voice stern and commanding, causing them to freeze for a moment in indecision. He firmly ordered them to stop, saying that enough was enough, and there was no point in continuing. He seemed outraged by their behavior, as if he considered their actions a mockery of himself. His voice was reserved, but there was obvious anger in it. He demanded an explanation. How dare they attack a defenseless girl? Aren't they ashamed to show force against the weak? These words offended one of the guys. He narrowed his eyes in displeasure, frowned irritably. Weak? This girl didn't seem weak to him at all, and it angered him that someone thought that about her. With a challenge in his voice, he asked what Basner would do if that didn't stop them. Did he really expect mere words to change their minds? Basner did not hesitate to issue a challenge. He declared that he was challenging Mule and Syme to a duel. If he lost, he would offer this lady his sincere apologies without further ado. These words finally angered the guys. They didn't even argue, and immediately went on the attack, furiously attacking him, as if not wanting to give him a single chance to prepare. Despite the pressure, the guy did not flinch. He was full of determination. The lady decided to stay away, preferring to simply watch what was happening, trying to understand who he was. She watched his every move, carefully amazed at his skill. How could a simple guy have such a level? His technique resembled the style of a first-class knight. But the question remained, if he was so strong, why did he allow himself to be treated like that? Why did he tolerate ridicule instead of immediately showing his strength? Having dealt with the opponents, he quickly switched to their condition. The lady, noticing this, ordered a first aid kit to be brought to help the wounded. Basner immediately fulfilled the request, bringing everything necessary without further ado. The lady carefully treated the wounds of the defeated, showing unexpected care. The guy even tried to get a word in, asking her to be a little more careful. But Ruvia immediately stopped his attempts. She firmly told him to sit still and not move, because it would be faster and easier that way. Then the guy, deciding to understand her motives, carefully asked why the lady was doing this. However, Ruvia only narrowed her eyes slyly and asked with a slight challenge, was he really unhappy with something? After all, she just wanted to. They all had to spend the whole day thinking about knightly principles. It was important to think about honor, dignity, and true values, and not just repeat memorized phrases. True, no one was going to take this seriously. It was unlikely that any of them would delve deeply into the meaning of the knightly code, but it was worth trying to direct their thoughts in the right direction. At that moment, Basner, having made up his mind, turned to the lady and sincerely thanked her for her care. He looked so touching that Ruvia involuntarily had the feeling that it was not a person standing in front of her, but a cute little deer. The thought that he looked like a deer had slipped from her lips before she realized it. Realizing her mistake, Ruvia sighed inwardly, her emotions seeming to have gotten the better of her reason. In order not to embarrass the guy, she immediately added that no gratitude was required. She just wanted to help, and she did it. And now he had better get down to business and go clean up. But Basner could not understand how it could be left like that. He was sure that he had to repay her for her kindness, because no one cancelled the debt of honor. Ruvia just chuckled and said that the best thing he could do was to stop pestering her with this talk. It was getting tiresome. But noticing his seriousness, she asked whether he was really ready to do everything she asked. Basner nodded confidently, confirming his words. Then Ruvia, narrowing her eyes, told him not to let others humiliate him anymore. After a short pause, she asked him directly what he was so afraid of. The reasons were unknown to her, but she saw one thing. He lacked self-confidence, and this needed to be changed. Sometimes, even a whole lifetime is not enough to realize the obvious, and realization can come quite unexpectedly, at moments when you least expect it. Ruvia noticed the boy rubbing his eyes, as if to chase away the last of the sleep, or to hold back tears. He looked at her gratefully. His voice sounded sincere. She caught a slight embarrassment in his gaze. The guy, slightly stumbling, promised that he would definitely listen to her words and remember everything she said. Once again, he thanked her, this time even more deeply. There was a firm conviction in his voice that he would never forget what she had done for him today. Ruvia felt tired from the day. She needed a distraction, and the best way to do it was to go out into the city and enjoy fried chicken and beer. Marie, sitting down at the table, noted with pleasure that she had not eaten anything so delicious for a long time. Each piece brought real pleasure, and she enjoyed the moment. Suddenly, someone familiar approached her. The man, with a slight smile, noted that fate had brought him together with the lady again, as if deliberately arranging such meetings. These were the same guys who claimed in the morning that they had worked all day cleaning the area. They looked happy and were clearly glad to meet. It seemed as if fate itself had decided to cross their paths again. They invited her to join them, as if they thought it was meant to be. The maid watched them with slight bewilderment. They seemed a little strange to her, so she decided to find out who they were and what they wanted. The lady, after thinking for a moment, agreed. She had heard that visitors were being paid today and saw no reason to refuse such an opportunity. The maid noted to herself that these men looked like quite pleasant conversationalists, even with some goodwill. However, the lady believed that her words were explained only by the fact that they paid the bill and nothing more. Still, she felt a little uneasy. She expected the worst, but it seemed she was wrong. These people turned out to be not as hopeless as she had initially thought. They were having fun over mugs of beer. After a few drinks, the guy suggested continuing by ordering another one. The lady shook her head with a smile, refusing. It seemed to her that she had already drunk quite enough, but the guy, having settled down comfortably, suggested it again. After all, they could drink another mug without rushing. The lady only warned them to relax, as they pleased, but not to get drunk to the point of unconsciousness, and not to cause trouble. The maid helped the lady out and asked worriedly if she was feeling well. The lady's body did not require so much alcohol, so stopping in time was the best decision. The air was already filled with the feeling of a new semester approaching. Bustle, new faces, a slight tension. Looking at this picture, one involuntarily recalled the events that took place 200 years ago. If you think about it, he always dreamed of creating an academy like this, full of knowledge and opportunities. This was his goal, but circumstances were such that he could not realize it. Despite this, he was different from everyone she knew. His actions, his character, his views. Everything about him seemed unusual, unlike others. In her memory, he remained special. After all, it was he who once changed her life, completely subjugating her to himself. He became for her the one for whom she lived, whose ideals she followed, and whose orders she carried out without hesitation. Time passed, but even 10 years after his death, she continued to remain faithful to his covenants. His will became her guiding star, leading her through the years. It was only because of this devotion that she fought for 10 long years, striving to fulfill what he had bequeathed. And in the end, she died sharing the fate of others. She gave herself entirely to this path, but the desire to see him again did not disappear. However, it was time to leave the past. Now she was Ruvia Ruxin, and this life belonged only to her. Today, she was especially lazy and decided to rest a little. But suddenly, the maid entered the room with news. An invitation had arrived for the mistress. Ruvia sat up in surprise and asked if she had heard wrong. However, the maid confidently repeated the invitation was indeed intended for her. It turned out that it was sent by Princess Sophian, a representative of the influential family of Duke Haynes. The lady formally invited Princess Ruvia in her letter to a tea party, hosted personally by Sophian, of the Duke of Haynes family. The invitation was written in an elegant handwriting, emphasizing respect and special attention to the addressee. However, Ruvia was genuinely puzzled by this invitation. She did not understand why Sophian suddenly decided to invite her to such an informal event. After all, they had no common business or close acquaintance. The line of Duke Haynes was considered one of the most influential and was not inferior in importance, even to the Ruxin family. Therefore, Ruvia asked the maid with distrust if she had heard anything about Sophian, because such attention seemed suspicious to her. Marie, her loyal maid, quickly responded that Sophian was not just another girl from a noble family. She was incredibly famous, one of the most respected figures among those admitted to the academy, and attracted a lot of attention. In addition, Sophian ranked second among all girls in both beauty and academic achievements. Her appearance is admired, and her knowledge and ability to behave in society only add to her popularity. The girl is not only educated, but also has a good-natured disposition, and her origin from a great family only strengthens her influence. Many dream of friendship with her because communication with such a person opens many doors in high society. It is said that especially the first-year girls try their best to win her favor. Becoming her friend means securing a higher position among her peers and gaining the support of an influential family. However, Ruvia, hearing all this, only frowned thoughtfully. Without saying another word, she indifferently ordered Marie to throw away the invitation, not attaching any importance to it at all. The maid was taken aback by her mistress's reaction. Not believing her ears, she asked again if she had understood correctly, because such an invitation was a great honor, and it could be impolite to refuse it. But Ruvia remained adamant. What tea party? She had no interest in participating in such events, and in her opinion, the invitation was simply not worth the effort. Marie, however, was not going to give in so easily. She noticed with excitement that the invitation had been sent by none other than the princess herself, and throwing it away was simply unthinkable. The maid again asked Ruvia cautiously if she was sure of her decision. However, she yawned lazily and said that her plans for today were much simpler. She intended to sleep. When the entrance ceremony arrived, Marie couldn't help but ask again if the lady had changed her mind and was still planning to attend the tea party. But Ruvia, as before, lay in bed enjoying her rest and calmly replied that she was quite comfortable here and that she did not intend to get out of bed. She casually noted that she was not feeling well, which meant that she could not go there even if she wanted to. This was her final answer, which was not subject to discussion. However, Marie, watching her, shook her head doubtfully. Her mistress looked absolutely healthy, and there was clearly no reason for refusal. But Ruvia only grinned and replied with lazy grace that she was of course ill and also incredibly beautiful. The maid informed her that there would be an open house at the social club that afternoon. She suggested that the lady might be interested in attending the event, as influential people gather there, and it would be a good opportunity to make useful contacts. However, the lady immediately made it clear that such gatherings do not appeal to her. She prefers to have a few but sincere friends than to be surrounded by hypocrites who only pretend to be friendly, hiding their true intentions behind masks of politeness. The maid was noticeably upset because her mistress not only avoided social events but did not even attend classes. She wanted to say something, but at that moment, there was an unexpected knock on the door, interrupting their conversation. The lady did not get up from her place, and without changing her expression ordered the maid to look who had come. Marie, clearly displeased with the sudden visit, reluctantly headed for the door, sighing irritably on the way. An elegant woman with golden hair stood at the door. She introduced herself with dignity and said that she had been sent by House Haynes. Her purpose was to meet Princess Ruvia in person, and she hoped that she would find time for her. The lady slowly approached the stranger. While in the dining room, her voice was calm, but full of hidden indifference. She introduced herself, making it clear that she was Princess Ruvia, and then asked directly what business had brought the guest. The woman explained that she represented the House of Haynes and had come on an official errand. She respectfully handed over a letter containing an invitation to an important event, the opening party hosted by the House of Haynes. In addition to the letter, the woman also conveyed a personal message from her mistress. It stated that Mrs. Haynes was very much hoping for Princess Ruvia's presence and had even reserved a special place for her at the upcoming reception. Ruvia, without showing much interest, asked to convey her gratitude for the invitation. However, in response, she said that unfortunately she had to decline, as she was ill and would not be able to attend the event. The woman from House Haynes fell to her knees in horror. At the refusal, her voice filled with desperation, as she pleaded that Princess Sophian had ordered her to gain Ruvia's consent at any cost. Ruvia looked at the woman carefully and noticed that she was shaking, and there were tears in her eyes. She decided to check if she would really be punished if the invitation was not accepted. Judging by her reaction, her guess was correct. In response, the maid confirmed with a pleading voice that if Ruvia refused, her mistress would be angry, and this would threaten her with severe punishment. At that moment, Ruvia realized that behind this invitation was none other than Princess Sophian, known for her treacherous character. She glanced at Marie and mockingly asked her if she had said that Princess Sophian had a good-natured nature. It was now obvious that things were quite different, and this meeting could cause her more trouble than it could help. The maid remarked that she had heard other servants say that her mistress was noble and gentle. To this, Ruvia responded with a slight smile that she was kindness itself, if that was how it seemed from the outside. Then she calmly said that she understood everything and asked to tell the princess that she would definitely come. There was no surprise or doubt in her voice, as if this was the most ordinary thing. The maid immediately began to bow low, expressing her sincere gratitude for her mistress's acceptance of the invitation. There was obvious joy and relief in her voice. Having calmed down a little, the maid carefully asked Ruvia what to do now, since this invitation could have consequences. Her gaze betrayed her anxiety. Ruvia only calmly replied that now they had no other choice but to go and see what kind of celebration the princess had planned. There was a slight interest in her words. The maid, a little surprised, asked if the mistress understood that this was not in fact an ordinary reception, but an invitation to a duel in the Swedish circle, where the rules were far from simple. This is a place where true predators hide behind the mask of refined smiles and elegant speeches. Here, every step requires caution, because an attack can follow at any moment. However, Ruvia only replied with a grin that she was even curious to see how cute the princess would be in such a dangerous environment. There was a slight mockery in her voice. The maid asked again if the mistress was sure it was a good idea to go there. There was doubt in her tone, because the event could be dangerous. Ruvia, without a shadow of hesitation, assured that she was absolutely sure. Then, suddenly changing the subject, she asked the maid if she really thought she was ugly. Maria, slightly embarrassed, replied that the lady was, of course, beautiful in her own way, but in this society many pay great attention to appearance and clothing. Princess Sophian's final dress, which she wears at the academy, is noticeably different from the others. It is much more richly decorated. Its fabric is expensive, and the embroidery is fine and exquisite. In comparison, even the lady's outfit seems modest. Ruvia, looking at the maid's efforts, just shook her head. She calmly said that this was just a normal meeting, and there was no need to dress up excessively. The most important thing was the inner world of a person, not external showiness. After all the preparations, they went to the party. The carriage quickly took them to the place. The journey took very little time, and soon they were already standing in front of the entrance, ready to go inside. They were met by a butler who greeted the guests politely. He immediately showed the way the princess should take to get to the main hall, where the guests were already gathering. As Ruvia entered, her gaze swept across the room, filled with noble ladies. Among them, she noticed a girl with pink hair. Apparently, almost all the influential people of the academy were gathered here. This meeting confirmed her suspicions. The red-haired girl standing among the guests was Princess Sophian. Now Ruvia had no doubts about her identity. She had already assumed that the princess would appear here, but now seeing her only confirmed her thoughts. Everything was logical, and the meeting was inevitable. Coming closer, Ruvia politely introduced herself, noting that she was pleased to meet Princess Ruxin. She followed all the rules of etiquette, demonstrating respect. The lady also introduced herself in response. The red-haired princess smiled and remarked that she had long wanted to establish friendly relations with Ruvia, but had never had the opportunity until now. But now, finally she had such an opportunity, and she was sincerely glad about it. In response, Ruvia thanked him for the invitation, expressing her gratitude for the honor. Princess Sophian smiled and invited Ruvia to follow her. Her manners remained graceful, and her voice was kind, creating an atmosphere of politeness and friendliness. Then she mentioned that several of the girls she had invited had suddenly fallen ill and would not be able to come. This had come as a complete surprise to her, and she still could not believe the coincidence. The princess hoped that they would show up later, but for now she suggested that Ruvia take the empty seat. This seat seemed the best, so there was no doubt about the choice. For the red-haired princess, Ruvia was the only one worth worrying about. They were of equal status, which meant that she was the main rival in Sophian's eyes. If she could make Ruvia look bad, she could gain influence among the entire secular retinue of the academy, thereby strengthening her position. However, for Ruvia, her plans seemed too predictable. Everything the princess tried to come up with seemed banal and unoriginal, like a repeat of a hackneyed script. She hadn't expected that there would be so many of these cuties in the academy who were seeking power through intrigue. She found it all funny and a little tiresome. Ruvia sat alone, but her maid was next to her. There was a cheerful atmosphere around people laughing and having fun, but Ruvia felt completely outside of all this noise. She thought that there were ladies gathered here who were trying their best to please the woman who stood out from the crowd, but in fact, it didn't really matter to her. While others try to please, there are those who prefer to stay on the sidelines, not interfering, just watching what is happening, trying not to become the center of attention. The party was absolutely incredible, and Ruvia sarcastically noted how much fun everyone was having. Because she was bored and uninterested, she would have preferred something else. The lady couldn't figure out what to do. Maybe she should punish this woman, put her in her place, and take away all the attention she was attracting. But so what? However, Ruvia wasn't sure if she should do it at all. All her thoughts were confused, and her desires seemed to be at odds with what was happening around her. All she really wanted was for no one to touch her, for her not to be disturbed, and for the rest of the fuss not to concern her personal preferences and desires. Suddenly, Ruvia lifted her leg and placed it on the table, which made the maid confused. She could not understand what the mistress decided to do. It looked strange. But Ruvia, deciding that her time for fun had come, decided not to hold back. She stood up and did what she wanted, giving in to the moment and not thinking about the consequences. At this moment, she was not going to hold back. With this attitude, she threw the table towards Princess Sophian, causing surprise among everyone present. Everyone turned to look at Princess Sophian, and the scene Ruvia couldn't help but notice how the table suddenly fell, drawing everyone's attention to the scene. Ruvia, trying to pretend that nothing unusual had happened, said with an innocent expression, "How strange, I don't understand why this happened." Apparently the table wasn't very good. After thinking about what had happened, Ruvia decided it was time for a change of scenery. She began looking for a new place, away from everyone, to continue her stay in this strange place. Ruvia noticed Jane sitting at the table and happily said that she was pleased to see her friend. She smiled as she came closer and looked at the girl with respect. However, Jane got very angry. She sharply objected that her name was not Jane, but Jeanette. The girl was unhappy and did not understand why Ruvia called her that. Ruvia, without losing her good mood, noted that she was still very pleased to see Janet. She was not offended by such behavior and was in a friendly mood. Janet tried to explain that Tanya should come to her, but Ruvia asked her to say it again, emphasizing that she had not quite understood her request. All this was with a smile. Ruvia pinned Janet's legs with a chair, asking her again if she really didn't want the mistress to come. She also clarified that if she had anything to say to Ruvia, let her say it. After that, Janet immediately corrected herself. She admitted her mistake and said that Ruvia could sit next to her. The girl was glad to see her again and offered her a seat with a smile. Ruvia, curious about what her companion was drinking, asked what she had chosen. Janet replied that it was white tea and explained why she liked it. Ruvia noticed that it was probably the cream cake that was offered to her. Janet liked such sweets, but Ruvia thought that it was too bland and not tasty. Princess Sophian's face was filled with displeasure. She couldn't hide her displeasure and asked Ruvia what she was doing at this event. Ruvia told the princess that since it was her party, she should point out that such a tasteless cake should not be served to guests. It was important for the atmosphere. Ruvia expressed doubt, asking if the princess would say that she was wrong in her remark. She waited for Sophian to give her some kind of response to her comment. Sophian didn't hesitate and quickly stood up, demanding that Ruvia stop such remarks. She was clearly ready to defend her taste preferences, but it was too late. Ruvia grabbed the cake and threw it on the floor. It was a flamboyant gesture that stunned everyone at the party. Everyone in the room was shocked. The cake had broken into pieces, and Ruvia noted with regret that this was really unfortunate. Everything ended up on the floor again. Ruvia noted that under these circumstances, continuing the tea party would not be the best idea. The situation was clearly not conducive to continuing it. It's a pity that the lady thought that Sophian was probably enjoying what was happening. Apparently, her opinion was very different from what was actually happening. The princess was clearly furious. She could no longer hold back her emotions and loudly asked what Mrs. Ruvia was doing. Confusion and anger were clearly felt in her voice. Ruvia had such a funny expression on her face that the princess clearly couldn't figure out what to say to her. All this made it clear that Ruvia had made the right choice. The princess had already started screaming that she couldn't turn a blind eye to all this. She was furious and had no intention of putting up with such behavior. Ruvia decided that since she had started, she might as well have some real fun. She picked up the cake and threw it at the painting, which narrowly missed Princess Sophian as it flew past. The princess was in complete shock. She couldn't believe that the mistress noticed how bad the cake was and decided to get rid of it. This shocked her even more. Ruvia didn't notice that the princess was standing right in front of her and apologized for the accident. She still didn't realize how close she had come to trouble. Then, the lady noticed another cake that was standing nearby and decided to take it to check it out. There was already excitement in her eyes. She was ready for new actions. Ruvia looked at the chocolate cake. Sophian was simply shocked and asked what she was going to do with this cake, clearly not expecting anything good. The lady was surprised to note that this cake was somehow strange. It seemed to be tasty, but something was wrong with it. This confused her, but she decided to figure it out. Ruvia was debating whether to throw it away or keep it. She couldn't decide whether to continue experimenting with this cake or to get rid of it. Ruvia curiously asked what the princess would say to all that was happening. She could not help but notice her reaction and waited for the answer with interest. Princess Sophian asked Ruvia not to do this. The tension in her voice was obvious. She clearly did not want the situation to get out of hand. Mrs. Ruvia noted that, to be honest, she didn't want to do any of what was happening either, but still her mind was full of doubts, and she continued to ponder. Despite this, Ruvia continued to ponder over what to do. She could not decide whether to give in to the princess's request or continue with the actions she had begun. Princess Sophian shouted at Ruvia not to throw away the cake, insisting that it was actually delicious. Her voice was so insistent that it was hard not to give in to her request. The princess was so determined that she was ready to eat the cake herself. Ruvia, hearing her, grinned, feeling that the situation was becoming even more interesting. Ruvia asked the princess if she could find a secluded place where she could be alone and think quietly. She did not want to be the center of attention, but needed privacy. The princess, a little surprised, asked again, "What does the lady mean?" Ruvia explained that she wanted to sort out the cake that didn't work out and talk to her alone. The princess, noticing the concern on Ruvia's face, felt that something was bothering her. She hesitantly agreed and offered to take her to another room to have some peace. Soon they found themselves in an empty room where they were finally alone. Here Ruvia could calmly think and talk about what was bothering her without prying eyes. The princess couldn't understand what exactly Ruvia was trying to achieve. She found it strange that she wasn't showing her role directly, but she still felt that there was something more hidden behind her actions. Ruvia confidently stated that she thought the princess thought she would forgive everything that was happening. But Ruvia could not say exactly how the events would turn out. Everything was unclear. However, she was sure that the cake was not destined to be a success, and the situation itself did not promise anything good. Either Ruvia clearly knew how it would end, although she remained a mystery to others. The princess did not understand what the mistress was doing. Why did she start all this? Ruvia asked what exactly she was thinking about and was ready to know the princess's opinion on what was happening. The lady, still dissatisfied, emphasized that she felt that the princess should have asked these questions, not she. It was clear in her eyes that she had not expected such treatment. Ruvia, in turn, insisted that she had done nothing that was worth discussing. But it was clear that the princess was trying to humiliate her, which was completely unacceptable. The princess recalled that the family motto of the House of Haynes was to not turn away from injustice, not to tolerate it. These words undoubtedly had great meaning for her, and she always adhered to them. The princess said that the mansion they were in was bought by her duke right after she entered the academy. It was an important step that confirmed her status in society. Ruvia thought mockingly that the princess must be really proud of her status, and that couldn't help but make her happy. However, she couldn't understand why she had to listen to all this. The princess became angry and loudly declared that she would make her mistress regret her words. This promise sounded decisive and promising. Her face expressed confidence that she would achieve her goal. Ruvia did not lose her composure and asked with a smile how exactly the princess was going to fulfill her promise. She was prepared for any surprises, but remained calm and confident. The princess declared that her first step would be this: she would do everything to ensure that no person from high society would talk to the lady. This was an important step for her in achieving her goal. Ruvia smiled and remarked that she finally understood what the princess wanted to achieve. This statement made her very happy, and she was ready for further developments. The princess, not understanding what exactly was meant, asked again what the cloud was. She was confused and did not quite follow the train of thought of the lady. The lady answered with confidence that in fact her goal was exactly this: to deprive the princess of communication with society. Everything that had happened before was only part of this plan. The princess, feeling threatened, declared that she must not be underestimated. She is ready to do everything to deprive Ruvia of her place in society, intending to not give her a single chance. Ruvia, flushed with excitement, smiled and replied happily that this was exactly what she had expected. She was not shocked by the threats, but on the contrary, she saw in them a confirmation of her expectations. Sophian looked angry, and her face was filled with anger. She couldn't believe that her mistress continued to treat her like this, feeling that her patience was running out. Ruvia sighed and asked why the princess didn't believe her words. She repeated all this so many times, but nothing seemed to change, and Sophian didn't take her seriously. The princess was in no mood to believe Ruvia's words, and she was not interested in them at all. She did not understand why she should trust those who could be hostile or incomprehensible to her. Ruvia was not going to lose her patience and continued her line. She emphasized that if the princess did not start listening to her, she would soon find herself in an even more difficult situation. Despite everything, Ruvia thought that there was nothing wrong with being a little late sometimes, if it gave her the opportunity to act more decisively and thoughtfully. She began to name famous ladies, noting that the princess must know them. Ruvia knew that these names were familiar, and she intended to make sure of it. Ruvia added that the princess must remember these girls, judging by her reaction. It was an important moment that could dispel all doubts if the princess decided to take it seriously. Ruvia said that all these girls fell victim to her cunning manipulations, which led to tragic consequences. For example, Jane had an accident, and her life changed. As a result of all these events, Jane became close to the guy who, as it turned out, Princess Sophian liked. This was unexpected and unpleasant for her, since she had a crush on him for a long time. Laviolia had lost her position, and the reason was so trivial that she herself could not remember it. Sienna was ruined, and the princess used the influence of her house to achieve this. The princess was shocked and could not understand how the lady knew about these events. She was scared and did not believe that it was true. Ruvia, in turn, asked with interest why she had such an expression on her face. Sophian couldn't believe that what Ruvia said was true. She was skeptical, thinking that it was just a fabrication. Her face expressed dissatisfaction and doubt. Ruvia turned to the princess and warned her that all these rumors she had just made up could cause great interest among other people. This could be dangerous for her reputation. She expressed her concern that if someone unscrupulous found out about such rumors, they could spread and affect Sophian's future. This could become a serious threat. Ruvia added that if the truth came out, it could be more unpleasant and disgusting, with new details that no one would expect to hear. It was very risky. Ruvia was surprised to ask if the princess really had trouble understanding what was happening. She probably needed to tell her everything directly, so that the princess would finally understand the threat. She noticed that the princess seemed to suggest that they pretend not to know each other to avoid consequences. This was one way out of a difficult situation. Ruvia assured the princess that if she did as she suggested, Sophian would remain in her place as the queen of society without being exposed to unnecessary dangers. Ruvia added with a smile that she would be like a sloth enjoying life calmly. This suited her. She did not worry about the consequences, believing that everything would work out. She declared that the mistress must now leave, and the princess, in turn, must think carefully about her words. This was the last warning, and much depended on it. Ruvia slammed the door without turning around. The princess was left completely confused, not understanding what was going on and what she should do with this situation. Hearing the princess's scream, Ruvia calmly walked away, slightly overdoing it in her actions. She knew she could have softened her position, but she chose not to compromise. She thought that sometimes it was better to be unprincipled and cruel, so that people would not try to get close to her. It helped to keep them at a distance and remain above suspicion. Ruvia was sure that the money spent on all this was worth it. Now she finally found peace, as all her actions and decisions led to the desired result. Before the tea party, the lady decided to do some digging into the past and turned to the guild, which had a huge amount of information. She was ready to learn everything. She spent almost all her money to buy information about Princess Sophian. She needed this information to protect herself and understand what was happening around her. The lady was almost certain that her decisions were correct. She understood perfectly well that she had acted preemptively so as not to put herself at risk. Snowflake reported that a new invitation had arrived. The invitation stated that in 3 days there would be a celebratory banquet for the freshmen, organized in honor of Mrs. Ruvia, and her presence was mandatory. As soon as Ruvia got rid of one problem, new difficulties appeared again. She did not expect that the situation would escalate again, and she would have to solve the problems that had arisen again. The letter clearly stated that the banquet was dedicated to the first-year students, and the presence of the lady was mandatory. It was important, and she had to prepare for the event. The mistress asked Maria to throw away the invitation. The maid was shocked and did not understand how she could miss such an important event as the entrance ceremony. This time, in her opinion, Ruvia simply had to go. Ruvia calmly replied that she did not want to attend the banquet. Her health did not allow her to participate in such events, and she preferred not to take risks since such events had a negative effect on her well-being. She stated that she was not going to interrupt her vacation for such events, and it would be better if she were left alone. At that moment, there was a sudden knock on the door, which attracted the attention of everyone in the room. The mistress continued to lie on the sofa when the maid heard someone asking if the mistress was there. This was unexpected, and Ruvia immediately became wary, not knowing who could have come to see her. Ruvia was angry. She did not understand who had come to disturb her again. At such an inappropriate moment, fear and discontent filled her, as she was not expecting anyone that day. The maid suggested that perhaps they had come because of the incident at the mansion, and Ruvia would now have to pay for her persistence and decisions. She was prepared for unpleasant consequences. However, the lady replied that it was definitely not related to this incident and ordered Maria to meet the guest. She was sure that nothing serious had happened and decided not to worry unnecessarily. When Maria opened the door, she saw a knight standing on the threshold. This was unexpected for her, and she was amazed that someone in such a state came to the lady. The knight asked if Lady Ruvia lived there. He had no idea who he was looking for, but his question seemed very formal and serious. Marie questioned the knight, wondering what had brought him here. She wanted to understand why this man, who obviously belonged to some important guard, was in their house. Then the lady realized that before her stood a knight with the coat of arms of the Western Imperial Guard, known for its honor and strength. This sign spoke of the knight's high status, which made her wary. She couldn't understand why he had come to her and what he wanted. She whispered to Marie to tell the knight that her mistress was not at home, hoping that this would take him away. Marie explained to the knight that her mistress was indeed absent. She clarified that she was not deceiving him and that her mistress was not present. The knight seemed to accept her words, but continued to wait. After some time, the lady did appear. Deciding to find out if this knight had any important business that required her attention, she approached and calmly inquired about his intentions. The knight greeted the princess, introducing himself as Lonson, a knight of the Imperial Guard. He spoke with respect and confidence, emphasizing his high status and his mission. Lonson explained that he was here on behalf of the Crown Prince himself. The lady, slightly surprised, immediately became interested in what exactly this prince needed and why he had chosen her. The knight informed her that the Imperial Majesty had sent her a gift. He said this calmly, but with noticeable respect for her position, expecting her to accept his offer. The knight explained that the gift was sent in honor of the lady's admission to the academy. After his words, the servant brought an exquisite dress, which immediately attracted attention with its magnificence. The maid was in complete shock, as she had never seen such beautiful and expensive dresses. Every detail was made with extraordinary care and sophistication, which amazed her. The knight added that His Imperial Highness hoped that the lady would have a pleasant time at the festive banquet being held in honor of the first-year students, where she would receive special attention. Ruvia wondered what could be hidden behind such an offer from this knight. She decided that she would not accept the gift because her intuition told her that there was some kind of deception hidden in it. The lady explained that she would be unable to attend the banquet due to a severe migraine, and so she gratefully declined the gift. She asked that her gratitude for the attention be conveyed. Ruvia stood up, feeling her condition worsen. She asked them to leave, as she needed to rest. Her illness was already tormenting her, and she could not afford to receive guests. The knights tried to insist, explaining that she should accept the gift, but the lady would not listen to them. She made it clear that she did not need his services, and did not want to violate her principles. They reported that the prince had also asked to give her a letter. The knight did not hide his concern, but the lady only nodded, not expecting that this letter could be important. The lady was surprised to receive a letter from the crown prince. She opened it immediately, noticing that the message was unexpected, but decided to read it anyway to understand what was required of her. In the letter, the crown prince stated bluntly that refusing the gift was impossible. He insisted that she simply accept the dress without asking any questions. Otherwise, the consequences would not be long in coming. The prince wrote that he was confident in her health, and in his opinion, her migraine was not real. He noted that they would definitely meet at the banquet, and he would be glad to see her among the guests. The lady did not understand what was happening, and why the prince was behaving this way. It was becoming increasingly confusing to her. The knights, however, did not wait for an answer, left the dress, and wished her a speedy recovery. Ruvia wondered how quickly they had managed to leave the dress and walk away. She was surprised how calmly they had left her, leaving her wondering what it all meant. Marie noticed that the crown prince was a true romantic because he had sent her such a beautiful dress. She considered it a gesture of great care, even if there was some hidden purpose behind his actions. The lady replied that she had no sympathy for the prince, despite his attentions. She was sure that his feelings were not sincere and that his actions had hidden motives. The maid objected, saying that this was not so. She had immediately felt that the crown prince was an incredibly charming person and could not have been more delighted by his attentions. Ruvia said that the dress was beautiful, but at the same time, she felt disgusted by the gift itself. This gesture of the prince, in her opinion, was too impudent and not appropriate for such an occasion. The lady thought that sending the dress before the banquet meant that the prince expected her to accept his invitation and appear at the event, despite all her doubts. Marie also noticed that it was some kind of courtship, because the prince said that she was very charming, and perhaps he was already beginning to fall in love with her. She could not understand why he was behaving like this. The lady could not believe that these words were sincere. Her experience told her that such statements were merely manipulations and not manifestations of real feelings. She remembered that the prince was a great strategist, and she knew that he wasn't doing anything for nothing. It was all part of his plan to get her attention and manipulate her. The lady couldn't understand why this man who played such complicated games would waste his time courting a girl he didn't even know. She was getting more and more irritated by this. Ruvia firmly told the maid to throw away the dress and the letter. She wanted nothing to do with the gift and refused to accept it, despite its cost and splendor. The maid was outraged by this decision. She could not understand how one could throw away such an expensive gift, which seemed to her a symbol of attention and care. The lady insisted that the gift was not only an unwanted reminder of the prince, but also a symbol of manipulation. She ordered the dress to be burned, and salt sprinkled on everything to get rid of it. The maid tried to persuade her mistress to reconsider. She believed that this could be the first step towards destiny, a chance that should not be missed, and insisted that she accept the gift. However, Ruvia did not want to listen to this. She said that the only reason the maid did not want to throw away the dress was because it was expensive, but that did not matter to her. Marie noticed that it was not the cost of the dress, but the fact that the lady was too ungrateful. She could not understand why Ruvia did not appreciate such attention, because the prince was clearly trying. However, she couldn't help but notice that the crown prince, although he tried, was much more sincere in his efforts, unlike the fourth prince, who was disappointing in his attempts at courtship. Ruvia thought that despite all the attention from the crown prince, she was already tired of such displays of interest. If the fourth prince also started paying attention to her, it would be too much. The maid expressed her dissatisfaction with the fourth prince. He was completely uninterested in her mistress and made no effort to win her attention. This greatly disappointed her. She expressed her dissatisfaction that such a beautiful and magnificent woman as the mistress should not pay attention to this fool who could not understand her value. At that moment, there was an unexpected knock at the door. The man who stood at the door was a servant sent by the fourth prince. He had called the lady to tell him something important and was standing there waiting for her reaction. The maid was frightened, not knowing what this could mean. She could not understand how they knew that the mistress was speaking ill of the prince. Thoughts about the possible consequences were already creeping into her head. Ruvia calmly told the maid to calm down. She decided that she would open the door herself and sort out the situation, not wanting to panic and make unnecessary assumptions about what was happening. Opening the door, she saw a servant who immediately greeted her with respect. He politely waited for the mistress to listen to him and perhaps answer his requests. Ruvia asked him what he needed and immediately made it clear that she was ready to listen to what had happened. She was ready to understand the situation, to take her time making decisions so as not to make a mistake. The man said that the fourth prince had sent her a gift. He explained that it was a sign of respect for her admission to the academy and that it was time for him to leave. The maid immediately understood what kind of gift it was because she saw a silhouette that immediately gave away its origin. She felt that the situation with this gift was not without hidden purposes. The man added that the prince wished her a good rest. The wish was polite, but it could not hide his true goal, to attract the lady's attention to himself. The lady sighed, and Marie was simply delighted. She already knew that the prince could not leave her without attention, and was ready to do everything to prove his attention and care. Marie was sure that the fourth prince was the best among them all. His actions, although strange, were an indication of his interest, and she admired his determination. Ruvia couldn't understand what was wrong with them. Why did both princes, each in their own way, send her such dresses at the same time? It seemed too strange and not random. She understood that the crown prince, although he tried, was still more sincere. The fourth, in her opinion, did not show real interest in her, and now only reminded her of himself. It seems he decided to remind her that he is her fiancé after all. Before that he acted as if he was not interested in her at all, and now with such a gesture, he is trying to draw her attention. Ruvia assumed that he might be acting this way because of the attention the middle prince was now showing. But regardless of the reasons, she decided that she would not participate in this strange triangle. The mistress ordered the maid to burn both dresses, wanting nothing to do with them. She was sure that this was the best solution to put an end to this attention. The maid tried to object, saying that the mistress was going to a banquet, and these dresses could be useful to her. But Ruvia was adamant her decision was not subject to doubt. The maid could not understand how such expensive gifts from princes could be thrown away. It was too wasteful, and she could not accept such cruelty towards things of such a level. The lady agreed that throwing away the dresses would be too stupid. She decided that it would be best to burn them, to forget about the gifts, and to end this stage of her life. Ruvia decided that she could make a profit out of these dresses. She knew she wouldn't wear them, but she could use them as a means to improve her financial situation. She decided to sell both dresses and got $4,000 for both. This was exactly the amount she expected because the items were really high quality with impeccable execution. The money could have been spent on essential household expenses, and Ruvia felt she had made the right choice. Maria was shocked to learn that she had received such a sum for 2 dresses. The lady asked again if she was really sure she should sell them. She was looking for confirmation of her decision to make sure it was the right move in this situation. Marie didn't understand what the mistress was talking about and was a little embarrassed. She couldn't understand whether the mistress was making fun of her or was really going to do something so strange with the gifts. After that, they went to lunch, and the maid, although she could not fully understand what had happened, still noted that this was not the worst option that could have been chosen in such a situation. She noticed that in many popular novels, the main character often declines gifts as if to demonstrate her independence and integrity. This added interest to her image. The maid thought that all this was not about money. For the mistress, it was simply a way to find the perfect meeting with love, as it often happened in the book she read. Even without reading such novels, the mistress intuitively acted like their heroines. Everything she did seemed carefully thought out, and the maid thought that the mistress was a real genius. Marie noted that steak is indeed delicious at any time of day, regardless of whether it is morning or evening, and could well be an excellent addition to any meal. She also noticed that it seemed that someone was already waiting at the door for the lady. Someone was persistently ready and seemed to have been expecting her appearance for quite some time. As they came closer, the maid whispered that there was probably some attractive young man standing behind the door who had attracted her attention with his appearance. The lady immediately realized that this was the same guy she had once called Little Dear. He was unnoticeable, but left some trace in her memory. Although she couldn't remember his name, the guy was the first one to introduce himself, which left her with a pretty clear impression of his mannerisms. It turned out to be Basner, and he greeted the lady with a sincere smile, asking how she was feeling and how her time had gone, whether she had had any problems. The lady, smiling, replied that everything was fine with her, but immediately asked what exactly had brought him to this moment, what he wanted to tell her or convey. She noticed that his aura had changed, and he said with confidence that he had come to thank her for the incident that had become significant and important to him. Although she knew she should say that she shouldn't be thanked, she felt that it was hard for her to say the words. Something was preventing her from fully expressing her thoughts. Sighing, she said that she really just wanted to help, and did so he shouldn't worry or be too concerned about the situation. The guy, despite her words, still insisted that it was very important to him, and although she claimed that there was no need to worry, it was a difficult situation for him. He wanted to do something worthy that could properly thank her for her help and kindness, assuring her that his intentions were sincere. The lady, interested, agreed and asked what he had come up with, what exactly he had decided to do to express his gratitude and show his appreciation. The boy turned to the man next to him and told them to bring what he had prepared for her. He looked confident and excited about the surprise. Soon, they saw a familiar silhouette, which the maid immediately recognized. It was a dress, most likely a banquet dress, which clearly indicated that some kind of event was being prepared. Basner, noticing her gaze, asked her not to feel uncomfortable, assuring her that this gesture was made sincerely from the heart and had no hidden motives. The lady was grateful for such a gesture, but could not help but try to express her unwillingness to accept such a gift, using only gestures, trying to refuse. But the boy, with determination in his voice, said that he had one more thing to tell her. He expressed his gratitude, calling her his benefactor for what she had done for him. He explained that until recently, he had a huge wall in front of him, that he felt like a heavy burden. This wall had been pressing on him all his life, holding him back from taking action and making decisions. This wall forced him to live in constant fear, to avoid confrontations, and to hide. But meeting her, Ruvia, changed everything, destroying his internal barriers. His meeting with her became a turning point, a reason to face his past and finally confront what he had tried to hide for so long. And then finally, he realized that all these years he had been pathetic, that he had been avoiding himself with reality, with what was preventing him from moving forward, with what needed to be overcome. But now, he has firmly declared that he is not going to run away anymore. Whatever the outcome, he is ready to fight to the end, with the confidence and determination he has gained. And all this became possible thanks to Ruvia. He felt that her help and support became for him the turning point that radically changed his outlook on life. The maid was absolutely delighted. The lady, however, was somewhat puzzled. She did not quite understand how this had happened, since her intentions were much simpler. She only wanted to teach those rude people a lesson. The guy, noticing her bewilderment, explained that he had been thinking for a long time about how to thank her for everything she had done for him. He understood that no gift could compare to what she had given him. It would have been better if he had simply forgotten about that incident. But the boy continued to say that he had heard that she had set herself a high goal despite her illness and had gone against the Archduke to enter the academy. Currently, despite her high status, Ruvia is facing financial difficulties as the Duchy's support has been cut off. This is causing her serious problems. Because of this, people begin to joke and ironically discuss what outfit the princess will appear in, laughing at her position and appearance, not knowing the whole truth. However, one person knows who this woman really is. He understands her virtues perfectly well and cannot allow anyone to dare to humiliate her. He knows that he can do little, but he decides to act with nobility. To help a little, he prepares a magnificent dress for Ruvia, hoping that she will accept it. Although this gesture is not enough, he will be greatly honored if she accepts the gift because he sincerely wants to help and support her in this difficult time. Ruvia was lying on the bed in her room, and her maid, noticing the new dress, thought that it was indeed very beautiful and truly elegant. The dress looks very expensive. It probably costs at least 2,000, the maid thought, appreciating its high quality and chic appearance. She decided to ask the lady what she was going to do with this expensive gift, whether she would wear it or decline it. Ruvia considered this. The thought of declining this gift troubled her conscience because it was sincere and made with a genuine desire to help. Moreover, Basner had not mentioned what kind of house he represented when he met her, which led her to believe that he probably did not belong to an aristocratic family. Ruvia knew that she had probably had a hard time saving up the money for the dress. After all, the kingdom of Carmen, where she had brought part of her past life, was the central region of the country. In a sense, Ruvia had met a fellow countryman, although they did not get along because behind her back there were often hired killers who were sent on orders. The maid watched her mistress with interest, trying to figure out who could be making fun of her. Outwardly, she looked serious, but sometimes her reactions seemed unusual. Ruvia was sure that behind all these pranks were the same girls with whom Princess Sophian was always by her side. It was obvious to her, and there was no doubt. The maid insistently suggested that Ruvia wear this dress, go to the banquet, and impress all the guests. She believed that this was the best way to prove her strength and beauty. However, Ruvia herself did not share such enthusiasm. The banquet and all these tricks did not interest her much. She was much calmer than she might seem. Curious, Ruvia asked Marie when the banquet would take place. She was not aware of all the details, but she had always been interested in events. Marie replied that the banquet would be in the evening, adding that from now on, the lady had better not eat anything. It would be better to leave food for a more important event, the banquet. Ruvia asked in surprise what she meant. Marie explained that there would be delicacies at the banquet, and if she did decide to eat, there would be plenty of treats. Ruvia decided it was a good idea to let those around her admire her presence. After that, she decided to rest, and Marie was happy to see her mistress in a good mood. At the party, all the guests expressed admiration for Princess Sophian, saying that she was incredibly beautiful and seemed to shine, illuminating the entire hall. Her appearance captivated everyone. Janet enthusiastically admitted that she was very envious. Sophian was so charming that it seemed that there was no one important or interesting at the banquet except her. The princess responded gratefully and noted that even Janet's pink ponytails looked beautiful today. She always had a knack for noticing good details that others might miss. Sophian always maintained the right tone in conversations, preferring sophistication and refinement in communication. The words she spoke were always like artfully selected works. In contrast, Ruvia was perceived as something low and unattractive. People, it seemed to her, were trying to judge her by her appearance, but the point was different. However, the girl could not forgive the fact that she was insulted again. Princess Sophian and her servants had crossed the line once again, and Ruvia was ready to pay for it. Janet, feeling uneasy, quietly said that she hoped Lady Ruvia would not show up today. She did not want her presence to spoil the atmosphere of the evening. There was silence in the room. In response to her words, everyone felt that Janet regretted her words, realizing that she had reminded everyone of Ruvia, who might have suddenly appeared. Janet was just nervous, worried that Ruvia would actually show up and cause some trouble. Her head was spinning with thoughts about the possible consequences. Princess Sophian calmly said that there was no need to worry about Ruvia. She assured that the girl had no business here, and she herself wondered if she would really come. Sophian had no idea what might happen. Even if Ruvia decided to come, she doubted that anyone would meet her because she was not expected. Everyone claimed that Ruvia would be left without company and would spend the evening alone without anyone to talk to and share time with. She would be alone as always. However, there were those who considered her too poor to communicate with others and even hoped that someone would help her. But one woman objected that it was not worth approaching her because she could infect you with recklessness. Sophian replied that even if everything really happens as they say, it is not worth continuing this topic in the conversation. It is better to leave the discussions because it is useless and does not lead to anything good. After all, they are all well-mannered ladies and should understand that such conversations should not take place in a civilized society. Of course, everyone should follow the rules of decency. After Sophian's words, the girls were in complete admiration. They began to agree with the princess, adding that her beauty was not limited only to her outer appearance, but also to her inner soul. By the way, there are rumors that Princess Ruvia failed the entrance exams, and this attracted attention. Her failure became a topic of discussion among the students. Interestingly, all the students' results were published except Ruvia's. This decision was made on the personal instructions of the principal, which surprised many. There is definitely something wrong with her results, and this behavior causes discontent among the students of the ZBT Academy. It is an insult to everyone who passed the exams with honor. Of course, we can't turn a blind eye to this, but no one knows the whole truth. So for now, it's worth simply observing the situation and not jumping to conclusions. However, Sophian also thinks that Ruvia might not be smart enough to enter the academy on her own. But something about that statement seems questionable to her. In fact, Sophian is very worried about her, although the girls do not understand why the princess is so concerned about the fate of this girl, because she does not seem special to her. Princess Sophian noted that she was aware of Archduke Ruxin's anger towards Ruvia and that her financial situation was also poor. All of this was alarming. Sophian asked if she had money to buy herself a dress for the upcoming banquet. She didn't want to show up in the same shabby dress as she did at the last event. If the princess appeared in this dress again, everyone would avoid her for the entire evening. Everyone already knew what it looked like and did not want to approach her so as not to be offended by her appearance. Many could not understand which of them would want to approach her of their own free will, because even according to rumors, this dress became a symbol of her failure at the last banquet. Sophian suggested that Ruvia should enjoy the banquet properly and not pay attention to other people's looks, because the evening would still be an important event. It was worth just relaxing and enjoying. Suddenly, the mistress entered the room, and immediately there was noise and hubbub. All the girls turned their gaze to her because her appearance could not go unnoticed at such a moment. Sophian was in complete shock when she saw Mrs. Ruvia in front of her. She seemed to have changed completely, and this caused her a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. Ruvia, feeling the gaze, asked the maid if there was something on her face because her embarrassment was clearly visible. She could not understand what caused such attention. Marie replied that there was nothing on her face except incredible beauty, which attracted all eyes. Her words, although they were a compliment, sounded quite unexpected. At these words, Ruvia only sighed painfully, as if she was tired of endless praise. She could no longer listen to these compliments, which in her opinion did not add to her joy. 2 hours before, the maid had informed her that the mistress must wait, as she seemed to be going away right now, but it was too hasty for an evening out. The lady couldn't understand why they were taking so long. If they didn't hurry, they would definitely be late, and she wanted to get everything done. This worried her, and she didn't understand the delay in the process. The maid explained that such banquets require careful preparation, because without it, the evening will not be so spectacular. She promised to give the lady a stunning evening makeup. Even if it was the fourth prince, once everyone saw her, they would immediately lose their heads with love and admiration. So she believed. The lady knew that she had agreed to this in vain, because the maid took her preparation very seriously and turned out to be too attentive, which made her worry. Who would have thought that her maid would be such a master of her craft? Her work was impeccable, and she clearly demonstrated that she understands how to be a true professional. Everyone turned their attention to her. The faces around her literally came to life, and everyone was ready to admire her face even more, which was undoubtedly too beautiful to leave unnoticed. The lady wanted to meet Basner and get out of here as soon as possible, so she pointed out the direction to the maid so that they could head in that direction quickly. Time was running out, and she didn't want to be late. The maid was surprised that the mistress decided to go to the farthest place. But suddenly one of the guys with whom she had recently fought came up to them and offered a dance. Here comes the rude fellow who bullied the fawn, she thought. She was surprised by his behavior and could not understand why he suddenly decided to ask her to dance. She was slightly surprised when she saw him. The guy looked embarrassed, as if he was experiencing some kind of failure or anxiety, which gave his appearance a certain sincerity. She wondered why her friend was asking her to dance, and then came to the conclusion that perhaps he had a crush on her, which put her in an awkward position. The guy looked extremely embarrassed, and the lady didn't want him to worry so much. She decided to joke, to ease the atmosphere and give him a chance to relax. She agreed to dance and said that they could dance, which pleasantly surprised the guy. He obviously did not expect her to agree so easily. The guy was incredibly happy with her consent. When they started dancing, his embarrassment was obvious, but it was important for him not to miss the chance to spend this moment with her. He moved awkwardly, like a wooden star, not at all like a knight, although they usually have at least some training in dancing. But here it did not feel that way. His manners left much to be desired. She would have to adjust to him. She noticed him blushing in embarrassment, and it made her smile slightly, because his awkwardness was so obvious that she felt almost uncomfortable. Everyone watched their dance, and it was noticeable that Princess Sophian did not hide her anger. She clearly did not approve of what was happening, and could not hide her displeasure. It was a real nightmare, as Jonathan noted, adding that inner beauty is much more important than appearance. And this, in his opinion, was the key to true charm. Others also supported his opinion. They could not understand how the guys could fall for such vulgarity, because the dance, like the whole situation, made an extremely unpleasant impression. She did not know how to dance at all. There was no charm in her movements, and this immediately gave away her low origin, which emphasized her lack of refinement. It was often hinted in conversations that her mother was a commoner, and it was believed that if the princess had been trained properly, she would have moved completely differently, more gracefully. Sophian, watching all this, remarked that she was very curious about who would be the next crazy person to ask her to dance. It would be awkward if he tripped again. And then a guy came up to her. Everyone was surprised, not understanding who it was, but one of the ladies finally said that it was Basner, a second-year student of the Knight's faculty, a commoner from the kingdom of Carmen. Princess Ruvia was a failure in their eyes, but with Basner they looked like a great couple, which only fueled the interest and curiosity of those around them. Everyone was eagerly waiting to see what they would demonstrate. When they started dancing, it was a real spectacle. The dance was beautiful and elegant. Every movement was smooth and harmonious, which attracted the attention of everyone around. The lady did not expect that the dance with Basner would be so unexpectedly magnificent. His movements were confident and graceful, which was a strong contrast to her initial expectations. He was really good, and his level of dancing was not just high, but truly outstanding, almost at the highest positions among dancers. She was amazed by his skill, Basner wondered what the lady was thinking about when she looked into his eyes. He was interested in her thoughts and wanted to understand what was hidden behind her gaze while they were dancing. She smiled at him and replied that he danced very well. These words embarrassed him, and he in turn said that the same could be said about her. The guy said it was his first dance with a lady, and he was amazed by her movements, which looked incredibly graceful and smooth, as if she was born for this. However, in reality, he felt a slight disappointment. He could not understand why the lady did not share his excitement and did not see anything special in it. He admitted that he had dreamed of asking her out first, but it hadn't worked out that way. He wanted her to feel like this was an important moment for him, not for everyone else. She just smiled and asked with interest what the difference was, because it wasn't that important to her. She didn't consider it something exceptional. Eventually, they started dancing. The guy, a little embarrassed, asked if she would agree to another dance if he asked her again. The lady nodded, and the boy was amazed. He could not believe that she had agreed, and he felt delight and hope growing inside him. The lady smiled and confirmed her words. She really enjoyed dancing with him. She enjoyed the moment when the dancer was so masterfully performed. Although she doubted that she would come to the next banquet, her dance with this guy left an unforgettable impression. Everyone around her was amazed by her grace and ease. No one could have imagined that Princess Ruvia could move so gracefully. Her dance combined elegance, nobility technique, and unrivaled beauty. The ladies whispered that dancing with a commoner was certainly Ruvia's style. Mule was certainly an aristocrat, but his reputation left much to be desired, and everyone knew it. Basner was of course a commoner, and many had no doubt that she would continue to dance with such people. This did not surprise anyone who knew Ruvia. At the same time, Princess Sophian was clearly dissatisfied. She believed that Ruvia would never be able to live up to her level, and she could not hide her disdain. Sophian bitterly stated that she no longer had anyone to dance with except commoners, and next time perhaps her partner would be someone from the lower class. Many doubted that anyone else would dare to ask her out, but suddenly, unexpectedly, another man approached Ruvia and asked her to dance. Everyone was shocked when they saw who had approached. When the lady turned around, her face showed amazement. It was so unexpected that she herself could not believe it. She didn't expect the crown prince himself to ask her to dance. Ruvia hoped he wouldn't do it publicly to avoid unnecessary talk. The lady asked him again why they should dance. She was about to leave the hall when he suddenly approached her with this proposal, surprising her with his decision. The prince replied that he had only invited her to dance. He saw no other reason, because there was a special connection between them that he wanted to express in this dance. This cunning young man decided to impress the audience and perform a little magic trick at the banquet, making everything more intriguing than just an invitation to dance. However, the lady refused, and the prince, stunned, felt how all his self-confident mood disappeared. The lady said that she was lazy, and the prince tried to say that he was completely serious and did not understand what it meant that she was lazy. He has long understood what benefit he can get from losing her, but she does not intend to get involved in a struggle for the throne or other political games. Unfortunately, he couldn't, and the prince didn't know what to do. She asked for forgiveness, but he is not handsome enough for her to cross her line. She told him to dance with someone else, and then she heard laughter. The crown prince remarked that it sounded offensive, that he was not good-looking. He thought he was okay, so he didn't ask her to dance. He didn't understand what to do. Hearing this, the last thing he wanted was to give up. He smirked, and the lady looked at him with disdain. She didn't like spending time with him. The lady turned away and told him to try dancing with someone else. Then the persistent prince decided to say that he had heard that the lady had sold his gift. This suddenly made her wary, and he asked again if the princess knew that selling an imperial gift without permission was illegal. After all, it's an insult to the empire. This bastard got to it without any problems. She noticed that his excessive persistence was off-putting, so she sold the dress. The prince asked again what difference it made. After all, she said that he was very good. Perhaps at least through persistence, he will be able to win her heart. The lady said that she was the bride of his younger brother, the fourth prince, but the gentleman noted that they were not engaged yet, and the princess was most likely going to break off this engagement. The lady was in complete shock. She did not understand how he knew about this, so he said that this lady should not refuse to dance with him because she was so beautiful. Before that, he reported on her, and now he is threatening. This crown prince is so funny that the lady doesn't even have any comments on it. He also says that it seemed to him that he had done nothing, but she decided to agree anyway. The prince asked her not to push him away because he really wasn't that bad. The lady looked at him with indifference. It seems that all crown princes have bad character. She tried to step on his foot every time, but each time he managed to remove it. The lady asked why he was dodging if he liked her so much. He decided to use protective magic. The gentleman replied that his legs were as dear to him as the lady's, which caused her to frown. He looked at her and asked if she really didn't like him that much. She said that it was true, and she really didn't like him. Ruvia didn't understand at all why he didn't want to hear her. The guy didn't understand why this was so. It was unlikely to be because of his unattractiveness. The lady replied that she did not like insincere people, and the prince did not understand what she was talking about. The lady said that she meant those who have hidden thoughts in their heads. The fourth prince's fiancée and the princess of the Ruxan Duchy. If she were an ordinary girl, he wouldn't treat her like that. She looked at him again with indifference. The situation had not changed. If she were an ordinary girl, it would be more difficult to ignore his offers so openly. The middle prince asked if his having other reasons was really so unacceptable to her. The lady said that this is not true at all. Circumstances in life can be different. However, as she said, she does not like insincere people. After that, the lady bowed and said goodbye to him. The prince asked permission to ask the lady something, since they had already finished the dance. Without waiting for an answer, he asked her if she would accept him if he was truly sincere with her. The lady said that even if that were the case, she still did not agree to it. The crown prince was embarrassed and asked why she was doing this to him. He was confused because he was not that bad. The lady said that it is still difficult for her to accept anyone, and this concerns not only him.